Hey guys. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Perfected the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 13, Silent War, Prank Day 53. Now that the Wave Group had better knowledge of the island, sneaking back in was quite easy. The half-completed bridge was well into Kawamiri distance for jumping, and it didn't take long before Nico was back with the rest of the team. Welcome back, the Kage Bunshin known as Shiro said. The clone nodded, then looked around. Only a dozen of us? He asked. We have more than 4 times that. The rest are out exploring, as per the plan. Any news? Nico asked. Not much yet. The only thing we found is a village completely emptied on the southern end of the island. The leading clone's face became hard as he said this. You mean, everybody killed? Shiro shook his head. No, it doesn't look like the case. A few corpses, but not enough to account for the entire population. Slave trading, then, Nico said grimly, and Shiro nodded in confirmation. That was one of the reasons the clone group in Wave was exploring. The main question the council had was why Wave? Compared to other places, Wave was close enough from the continent that people could, with difficulty, make their way there. Multiple ideas had been bandied about, especially by Iruka, but nothing certain. Seems so, Shiro said. You have the equipment? Of course, Nico replied, withdrawing a number of scrolls from his backpack. One of the issues with Kage Bunshins was weapons. While they were copied like anything else a ninja owned, they were unfortunately as susceptible to damage as a shadow clone, and damage could burst both weapon and holder at the same time. As such, the real Naruto had arranged for a large number of different weapons to be transported by Nico to Wave, to be used in the fighting. Here, Nico said, handing a dozen storage scrolls over. He then went back inside his backpack and got out a heavy pile of papers. And a few hundred tags. Shiro's eyes went wide. That many? I didn't even know we owned that much. We didn't, Nico replied. This is Iruka's contribution to the plan. As Naruto wasn't even a genin yet, he wasn't allowed to buy equipment such as tags and storage scrolls. For the scrolls, he currently had enough remaining, but the tags were a different matter. Iruka, however, as a chunin, wasn't so restrained, and had gone and bought enough for the planned mission, with some excess. Nice, Shiro said. We'll need to thank him once this is done. This'll make things a lot easier. He waved. Come on. Let's go store these. The pair did a number of specific jumps, disappearing in the forest that was inner Wave country. With all the experience the jumpers were getting at the Kawamiri, aiming for specific but distant places was easier by the day. The two of them ended up at a cabin in the woods. That's the main base? Nico asked. Don't be fooled. It's got a basement that's much bigger than its ground floor, Shiro answered, leading him down a ladder to said basement. It had nothing on the Uruhara training grounds, of course, but it was still large enough for the dozen clones that had followed the pair to base. So, show me where we're at, Nico said. Shiro drew his copy in front of a map. Well, he started. Prank Day 56. Kokiai, the male clone infiltrating the civilian academy, forced himself not to yawn. In front of the class, the female teacher was explaining the rise of the family of the current fire daimyo, and the fall of the previous one. It was boring as hell. As a copy of Naruto, he understood why the original had decided to infiltrate the civilian academy, and even agreed with what could be learnt there. It didn't mean, however, that he found the work interesting or anything. What he did notice, though, were the difference between the ninja curriculum and the civilian one. Some of them were evident, like the lack of ninjutsu, weapon classes and taijutsu, but even the classes both institutions had in common had major differences. Ninja history was about war, plain and simple. The clan wars predating the ninja villages and their resolutions, followed by what led to the great shinobi wars and how those ended. There were some parts about specific people and what they did, but that always went back to war in the end. Civilian history was about people, on the other hand. How this person found out this technique, or that place, how a group of 3 explorers created a village which became a major trade center. It rarely touched wars at all, and Shinobi even less. Over the past week since the two clones had been present, the names of only 3 ninjas were spoken, and all of them were kages. Even in maths there was an acute difference. Ninja maths were all about speed, crunching numbers as fast as possible to get results. Fast and close enough was better than slow and exact. Not for civilian maths, though. Naruto had known what were decimals before the start of the prank from one of his maths books, but he couldn't remember ever having to use them. For civilians, however, they were everywhere, from money to time to wait. It was disturbing. Kokiai sighed softly, and turned toward his sister and fellow clone. The pair of them had split the subjects at school in 2 halves, and history was one of hers. He didn't know why she'd chosen such, true, but he was glad for it. He didn't think he'd have been able to take it. What he did do was raise his book so that it is whatever he was working on, and took out his calligraphy homework. That was one of his subjects, and he thought it might help him learn seals in the future. So he took out brush and ink and started writing. He didn't have the best calligraphy, something that Iruka had long complained about, so he'd at least be better at that. The fact that it helped pass the time was the main reason for it, however. Prank Day 58. The 2 Naruto clones had never been in a restaurant this fancy. They were pretty sure that there wasn't a Naruto Bunshin in existence that had been, at least not as a client. The pair of them were led inside by Tucci to a large table in a booth near the back of the restaurant, where 4 men and a woman were already waiting at a table made for 8. Lady, gentlemen, the ramen chef started. Allow me to introduce Jisei Ane and Jisei Junei, owner of the, he thought for a moment. Kuroneko, was it? Both the clones nodded. Kuroneko Trading Shop. I've been doing business with them for a few weeks, and I think you'll be interested by what they have to offer. He then turned to the clones. Around this table are fellow restaurateurs of Konoha. Ishicho Kaku, owner of the Yakiniku restaurant. A dark-haired man in simple clothes waved. Mibi Suji, of the Shushuya bar. A nod came from man with spiky brown hair dressed in a kimono. Sumida Tetsuya, cook at the Konoha Zazenkyo. A dark-haired man with glasses bowed formally. Sakura Daiseiji, who owns the Ryuri Ryujin. Good day, the heavy-set man answered. And our hostess, Kaiseki Koju. Welcome to the Koju, Jisei-san, Jisei-san. She bowed to the 2 clones. The pleasure is all ours, they answered. Tucci looked around the table. Does anybody mind if we talk work before the food? Everyone shook their heads. Business before pleasure, always, Tetsuya intoned. Indeed, Tucci said, turning toward the copies. I suppose you have brought copies of your catalog? They had 4 copies between the 2 of them, which they handed on both sides of the table. I'm surprised such long-lived restaurants in Konoha are having an issue with supplies, Ane said to Tucci while the others were going over the catalogs. Junei had to agree. Koju's had a sign saying 50 years of Konoha history, and while the others weren't as old from his knowledge, Naruto had known about their existence since forever. Seiji and Suji looked at each other and sighed. The QB changed everything. Suji said. The Merchant Council works by election. A new member is voted by the remaining ones from Konoha merchants when someone holding a seat dies. The QB emptied half the seats, and it allowed a powerful block to form itself on the council. Most of us had links to 1 or 2 council members, but those were all among those lost. Since then, Kaku continued, joining the conversation. We've been having issues importing various foodstuff, spices and the like. Anything that's not coming from Konoha and its surroundings, really. Seiji nodded. Caravans are lost, there are issues with the orders themselves, theft, perished items. He sighed. All sorts of reasons. I'm personally of the impression that some people are trying to soften us, weaken us, their hostess said. Trying to force us to sell our stores. I've been receiving 3 to 4 offers for my restaurant every year, and I know I'm not the only one. The men at the table, even Tucci nodded. Junei stamped back on a surge of anger. Ichiraku ramen without Tucci wasn't something he wanted to contemplate. Prices are good, Tetsuya interrupted. I'll trust Ichiraku-san's word that delivery is prompt. There are, however, items that I am interested in that do not figure in your catalog. The catalog is only what we are sure to be able to supply, Junei replied. If there are other items you are interested in, please say so. As long as we have an idea of the price you'll pay and where it can be found, we'll do the best we can to get you the merchandise you ask for. We have contacts all over the continent, so go ahead and ask. Perfect, Seiji replied with a smile. The orders started coming out then, just as Koju started bringing drinks. More than half the items weren't on the catalog itself, but that simply meant the network had a way to improve. The meal afterwards was just as instructive. The various restaurateurs knew Konoha like the back of their hands, and were full of useful anecdotes and stories. Janae and Ane listened carefully, as there were plenty of hints and tips on how to run a business throughout. It didn't hurt that this was the best meal the pair had ever eaten, even including Ichiraka's ramen. Not that they would be saying so. That would be blasphemy. Prank Day 59. Where there had been less than 100 Naruto Bunshins in Wave 5 days ago, there were now more than 1,000. And they weren't stopping there. Already, the search had given good results. Gato was using a city on the side opposite to Fire Country as a port of call, and had as much mercenaries there that he had on the city near the bridge. Most of the cities on that side of the island were now ghost towns, emptied to the last person. The clones had infiltrated the city, again as a missing nin. Sanrio was the one who had taken that job once more, only this time as a ninja from Wind Country, since rumors said that Gato had a number of shinobi from Kirigakure on his payroll. It wouldn't do to be found out by someone who knew curing ninjas better than they did. The base they used had also changed. While the cabin in the wood was still used as an outpost and storage depot for weapons, the command center for the missing had moved. The Naruto Bunshins were now based off a abandoned manor near the center of the island, which seemed to have been emptied by Gato's forces in the previous months. They'd put a good number of sentries to make sure Gato wasn't coming back, though. Incoming jumper! A clone yelled from his position on the roof. Another Naruto clone appeared right in the square set for arrivals. He ran straight inside and went right to Shiro, who was still leading this mission. "We've got confirmation on Gato's shinobi forces," the jumper said as soon as he was in the same room as the leading clone. 4 of them. Zabuza, Haku, Goza and Meizu. One of the clone further back cringed. "Ouch," he said. "We've got heavy resistance right there." Shiro turned toward said clone, who was reaching for a book. "What do you mean?" Zabuza Momoichi, the clone read from the bingo book. It was Earth's, and the most recent one they'd found. The Demon of the Hidden Mist. Ex-member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. Ex-Anbu, master of silent killing. Still owns and uses Kubikuri Bocho, his sword. His eyes went wide. The bounty on his head is pretty big. "Not an opponent we can take, can we?" Shiro asked. "Not without piles of luck, no." Shiro turned back toward the jumper. "Good work. Go eat, then return to your position. We have to find out where he's based off. We can't attack until we know he won't interfere with us killing Gato." That wasn't something the Naruto clones were looking forward to, but leaving Gato alive wasn't an option. He'd proven he could do too much damage to be left living. It was even part of the Konoha shinobi education. Do not leave an enemy breathing at your back. "Yosh!" the jumper said, turning to run to the kitchen where his ramen was waiting. "So, everything else going according to plan?" Nico said. He was still a jumper, and had gone down the Konoha Wave Road twice more since he'd returned from Konoha the first time. Food had been his main cargo both of those times. "Not really," Shiro answered. "Gato's out of the country, and nobody knows for how long. We still haven't found his main base since he doesn't live at the port, and there's a rumor that the bridge builder left for Konoha to recruit ninjas for protection." Nico had to admit that the pressure was clearly mounting. Extra Konoha ninja meant that they might have to remove most of their forces so they didn't interfere with an official Leaf mission. "Incoming jumper!" Said jumper didn't even wait to be inside. The Gato Corporation flagship just arrived in port, with the man on board. Shiro sighed in relief. Finally! Prank Day 62. Even with Gato on the island, it took 3 days before they were ready to strike. Days which included frantic searching for the missing ninja's lair, constant shadowing of Gato by clones, most of them in animal form, and the discovery of the man's base. Turns out slave trading wasn't the only pie Gato had his finger in. Deep in the forests of Wave, accessible only through a hidden path from one of the many rivers in the country, Gato had a plantation more than a dozen square kilometers wide, all of it growing black swamp poppies. The source of the most addictive drug currently on the market. The only reason the clone group had managed all of that is because Gato didn't trust the ninjas under his command. He saw them briefly, maybe once a day, and no more. The tycoon trusted his security detail to a group of mercenaries, ex-samurais by the look of them. Said fighters didn't pick up the fact that Gato was being spied on. The ninjas would have. While it didn't seem like Zabuza had spotted them, the same couldn't be said of the girl/boy under his command, Haku. She was incredibly perceptive, and the clones tracking them had a number of close calls where a clone had to dispel himself in hiding. The Naruto bunchins ended up having to watch the missing Nin from much farther away, just to avoid detection. A clone appeared right beside Shiro using Kawamiri. Everyone is in position. Like everyone present, he was dressed in this mission's camouflage suit, all black with gloves and a simple mask with 0 inscribed on the brow. Should anything go bad, the clones didn't want nothing linking them to Konoha. The shadow clone leader nodded. Missing Nins? Zabuza has been spotted in their base, and Haku is a constant presence at the windows. I think he picked up something. Nothing else needed to be said, as Gozu and Meizu had been seen leaving the island 2 days ago, and hadn't been spotted since. That's probably the best we can get, Shiro said, nodding. He then looked at the jumper straight in the eyes. The mission is Geo, Code Amber. Good hunting, everyone. The jumper nodded, taking his kunai and dispelling himself in one move. Shiro's whole team surged forward and the leader had to catch up for a moment. Then they burst from the trees into the plantation, all the teams in perfect synchronization. You couldn't beat shadow clone messaging for timing. The picket guards didn't even have time to scream before the swarm was upon them. The guard before Shiro's team took a dozen mixed kunai and shuriken near instantly, and fell with a wet sound. Go, go, go! Shiro said intently, pointing toward one of the many buildings that served as barracks for the many swords for hire Gato has under his command. The bloody part of the day had started. Barreling through a closed windows, the clone with the very imaginative name of Kunanigo thanked all the training the clones had done on the chakra shield. Neither the impact nor the cutting bits of glass touched him, and he was inside. The sound woke all the mercenaries sleeping, but not fast enough. By the time the first warrior was up and armed, the clone had put a kunai in 6 different mercenaries trying to get out of bed. Only 2 had died, but all of them were now incapacitated enough that they wouldn't be causing problems for the moment. Q sidestepped the overhand swing of the swordsman, falling instinctively in the first stance of the sharp fist. His arm automatically came up, parallel to the blade, and he immobilized it instant, reaching for a kunai with his other hand. The mercenary was faster, drawing his tanto and slicing open the clone's belly. Q turned to smoke instantly. His death wasn't in vain, as the copy who'd followed him in put a shuriken straight in the mercenary's eyeball while he was wondering what happened. The 4 other clones finished up everyone else in the room. There were unfortunately many more to go yet. Gato's bedroom was on the 3rd and top floor of his mansion, as if that made him more secure. It didn't one bit. By now, the many Naruto clones were well versed in the tree-walking technique that Katori had taught Miramaro more than 2 weeks ago. 2 complete clone units, which meant 32 clones, hit the walls running and climbed them straight up. The sentinels on the roof, 2 sleeping swordsmen, with 4 more playing a card game, never saw them coming, and were down before any could raise a blade. Then they went back down to Gato's window. Said window was locked, true, but that didn't mean anything to the boy who was still Konoha's best prankster. It wasn't sealed shut, so it took around a minute before a clone had it open, and the teams filled inside. Gato's bed was large enough for 4 people, and for good reason since there were 4 people inside. Gato was clearly enjoying the fruits of his own enterprise, as he had 3 women along with him in his bed. And 2 of them seemed quite young to be in such a place. Team 1, the leader of this part of the mission, signed in what they called bunny language. Clean house, kill guards, capture others? 16 nods answered him as that group moved out of the room. The leader then pointed to 6 clones. Girls, take other room. No talk. More nods. Rest, gag, tie target. The masks hid everyone's face, but he could feel the smiles. As one could see, the language was still a work in progress. It didn't take 5 minutes before they had Gato tied up tighter than a sausage. They'd even given him a modesty sheet, though that was more for their own mental health than anything. He was then brought outside by a single bunshin while the rest started dismantling the man's office. Everything fine? The clone leading Gato asked Shiro as he reached him, standing in the middle of the fields. We have a dozens or so escapees, but nothing totally unexpected, Shiro replied. That's the man? The clone nodded. No reason to leave him alive now, Shiro said, withdrawing his sword, one of weapons which had come from Konoha. The group as a whole had discussed the possibility of torturing Gato, but realized they didn't have the stomach for it. A clean death or a death in combat was better. There were many clones who, as soon as the fighting was done, had gone to secluded spots and vomited what little they could. Shiro would do the same later, once everything was done. He was the leader, he had to hold it back now. Miyamoto had been training them in the sword for more than a month by now. They weren't anywhere close to proficient in kenjutsu yet, but cutting of the head of someone immobile with a single stroke was well within their abilities, given a minute to prepare. Gato's head rolled off his shoulders and fell to the ground, his body following a second later. This ended up being Shiro's only kill that day. Seal the head, the leading bunshin ordered, and have someone bring to Kakawada and add it to the collection. That was the settlement in wave closest to Fire Country, where the bridge was being built. Gato had a place there where he displayed the heads and bodies of the people opposing him. His own would be a crowning masterpiece of that collection. His body goes in one of the mass graves. The rest of you, pick up everything here that's worth something or is useful. We're burning the place once we're gone. He wasn't going to leave that much poppies for anybody to find. It was another half hour before Gato's safe was found, and 2 more before careful use of fire chakra melted it open. Shiro took the money there and, after a look at Gato's ledgers, sealed a large part of the money in a scroll, which was given to a specific courier. The non-monetary items found, Gato's hanko, bank keys and the like, were given to Nico, who made 6 clones and was on his way out of the country. It would take 15 days, but the rest of Gato's holdings and fortune would fall in the hands of the Naruto group. But now, there was one last thing to do before the day was done. Incoming, Haku said. Zabuza, ever a light sleeper, rose straight from his bed. Haku had been expecting something this whole day, if not this whole week. There was something at the edge of his senses that was making him nervous. He'd wanted to investigate, but his master had forbidden him to do so. Zabuza was expecting Gato to turn on him, and it wouldn't do for Haku to spring a trap. A knock came on the door. Haku opened it while Zabuza returned Kubikuri Bocho to its place on the man's back. There was what was visibly a ninja on the other side of the door, clad all in black with a blank white face mask. The character 40 was the only clue to the man's identity. Coming to see someone like me at 2 in the morning ain't conducive to continued good health, you know, Zabuza said, looking down at the ninja. The man bowed. I am sorry, but there have been developments I believe who should be made aware of. You got a name? You may call me Ray, the ninja said. And I am here to inform you of Gato's death, 3 hours previous. Zabuza scowled and his hand grabbed the pommel of the blade hanging over his shoulder. That ain't something I like hearing. Anything else I should know before gutting you like a fish? Haku had been focused all this time on the man. There was something bizarre about his chakra, and how it. A clone. Haku quickly signed this to his master. Zabuza's scowl grew harder for a moment. There ain't even any blood for my sword, he spat. Haku could tell the clone smirked, even with the mask. Indeed, a clone. You are the first to notice. I see your reputation is well deserved. Get to the point, Zabuza replied. Ray withdrew a scroll. I have here the payment promised to you by Gato at the beginning of your contract. And what will I have to do to get it, if I don't plunder from your corpse? Nothing, Ray answered, handing Zabuza the scroll. He tossed it to Haku, signing verify with his other hand. The Icenin did so, falling back deeper in the building. He released the money and counted it quickly, and it was exact to the Rio. He sealed it then once more. Money is good, Zabuza-sama. The tension in the room lowered. Why all this? Zabuza asked. Ray bowed again. The group I am part of would like to ensure good relations, simply. We may very well in the future require someone of your skill, and being fair is simply good business. You want a way to reach me, then, Zabuza replied. That would be perfect. The ex-Kuri thought for a minute, then gave the location of one of the dead drops Haku knew about, far away in grass country. The ninja noted all the details, nodded and said pleasure doing business with you. He then walked out in the forest, and was gone from his senses the next second. Pack your bags, Haku. Zabuza ordered, already doing the same. We're out of the country tonight. We grab the brothers and we go straight to water. The self-proclaimed tool nodded, grabbing his own equipment. It was only minutes later that he realized all the pressure at the edge of his awareness was gone. Prank Day 63. Iruka was glad to notice the sign that there was a meeting of those in the know tonight. Ever since the news from Wave had first come in, he'd stressed about what could happen. Last Sunday was even worse. He worked at the mission office on the weekends, and there was a C-rank mission to accompany Tazuna, whose name he recognized from the Naruto meeting, back to Wave. The Hokage personally handed said mission to Kurenai's teammate. While the woman was a talented jonin, the mission was said to be C-rank, which meant no expected contact with enemy ninjas. He'd nearly broken his promise to Naruto at that exact moment, just to give a warning. Only the fact that Naruto had said everything would be finished in the next few days stopped him from doing so. By now, navigating the Uruhara tunnels as they were called was second nature, at least from either his home or the academy. He arrived around the same time as everyone else, taking his seat opposite the real Naruto and his partner Ichigo. So, big news. The real Uzumaki said as soon as everyone was in their place. Nico's back with news of the Wave mission, and everything went fine. Iruka released the breath he'd been holding. Thank God, he said. So, Gato's done? Dead and buried, Nico replied. We left only his head and put it with the ones of his opponents on display. Iruka had to agree that was poetic justice right there. We looted everything we could from his businesses, burning the drugs and releasing the slaves. We are currently up 5.5 in Rio, and we haven't gotten to everything yet. Millions? That isn't much for a company like that, Iruka replied. Billions, actually, Nico continued. The man had a lot of money squirreled away all over the place. The main reason I'm in Konoha was to empty the accounts the man had here. Iruka's eyes went wide. I almost forgot. Here, Naruto handed Iruka a scroll. The money you gave us for the prank. After the casino trick we found, we didn't need it anymore. Casino trick? It seems we Narutos have huge luck at anything that's a game of chance, another Naruto, not the original, explained. The clones we have in Tanzakagai have been slowly but surely building up funds, especially for the trading network. With the payout of Gato's death, we're pretty much set for anything that comes. Iruka nodded blankly, crumbling in his chair. And the ninjas in Wave? That's the main thing he had been afraid of. They weren't really an issue, Nico pointed out. Gato didn't trust them, so we had no issue with the attack. We dealt with them afterwards though. Didn't want to have them hanging around. They were out of the country last time they were sighted. The clone smiled. Zabuza might have been gruff, but he played fair at the very least. Iruka was happy that he hadn't been drinking anything, as he'd have sprayed it all over the table. Momoichi Zabuza, he said, eyes wide. The demon of the mist? And you met him? Not me personally, Nico answered. But another clone, yes. He's rough around the edges, but he plays it straight. Best of all, we have a way to contact him in case we need some superior firepower. The many clones at the table nodded, while Iruka just stood there stunned. He'd never have agreed to the Wave mission had he known about Zabuza's presence. The man was known to snack on Mist A and BU teams. He'd have gone through the many shadow clones like a knife through butter. The meeting went on, discussing merchant teams and training. Iruka barely paid attention, still mentally stuck on the close call they'd gotten. Prank Day 65, Naruto, the real one this time, under no disguise, was intercepted right as he was about to go outside for lunch. The last few days taijutsu had given way to weapon throwing, which meant he could stop impersonating Urameru. The person was Katori, and Naruto had to focus for an instant not to treat him as Urameru did. What, sensei? The man's eyes bored into his. I am not a fool. I've seen you, he said, voice clear. You are clearly planning a prank of some kind. I know about it, and you won't catch me unaware. Chapter 14, It's a Trap, Prank Day 65. Naruto couldn't help but show some surprise, even though he tried to clamp on it. Had he seen something? Was there some detail he'd not paid enough attention to? Did his time as Urameru close to the man give him some sort of hint? Empty your pockets, the teacher cried out. Naruto did so, thanking the fact that he currently had nothing incriminating on himself. Still, the Chunin had him remove everything, even the contents of his hidden pockets. Katori scowled but handed all of it back to him. The teacher then looked straight down at him. I know you by now. You're too calm not to be planning something. You won't get me this time. He pointed at his two eyes. You won't escape my sight. With a flash of insight, Naruto understood what this was about. After Katori's revelations at the memorial stone, he'd stopped pranking the man. It would be like hitting someone who was down, and it felt wrong to him. He'd said it to Iruka at the beginning of the prank. he'd only prank the ones who deserved it. And Katori didn't, not anymore. Still, he need to explain that somehow. It's not what you think, Naruto quickly replied. If anything, Kiratori's scowl got harsher. Do tell. Well, Naruto said, building the story in his head. Muramaru, he caught me doing something. And he clearly wasn't happy about what he was seeing. We argued about it. I thought he should be on my side, 'cause we were both orphans, you see. That started an argument about family. I don't think he really wanted to say it, but the story of your family came out, sensei. Naruto had to force himself not to talk as Muramaru did, and bowed his head. I'm sorry. The look of the Chunin's face was well past the scowl level by now. You know nothing about it, he spat. I know better than you think, the blonde replied. He couldn't help but look down at his stomach, where the seal resided. Useless thing had been nothing but trouble his whole life. Kiratori's eyes went wide. You know about the K, he started, only to stop as Naruto made the universal sign for silence. The Chunin then looked all around to make sure no one had overheard, and by the time his eyes fell once again on Naruto, he was fully serious. Who told you that? The teacher asked, his voice clearly under tight control. Your predecessor, Naruto answered. The man told me, trying to turn me against the village. He made a slight smile. I punched his lights out. You still know nothing about my pain, Kiratori growled out. Nothing? Naruto replied. He couldn't help but start getting angry. Kiratori was by now one of his precious people, with all the help and training he gave Muramaru, and hearing him say that hurt beyond measure. Nothing? You're the one who knows nothing. You've had a father and a mother, brothers and sisters, even a wife and sons. You can remember their faces and their voices, you know their names and their stories. I'm sorry It was clear who Naruto meant, took them, but don't tell me I don't know loneliness. You. He spat that word. You at least knew them. I didn't even get that. This time, Naruto didn't shy from looking at Kiratori straight in the eyes. He took them from me just as he did to you. I didn't have a father to teach me how to read and tell me stories. I didn't have a mother to cook me good meals and bandage my wounds. Hell, I don't know if I was an only child, or if I had brothers and sisters before he came. By now Naruto was glaring. I don't even have their name. Uzumaki is honorary, after some village I know barely anything about. You never had to stand in the corner alone, while everyone else was having fun. You never had to face the glares and the words and the rocks they sometimes threw. He couldn't stop, not now. You never had to spend your birthday in hiding, because they might hurt you if they found you. You think you know loneliness? You know nothing. You only know loss. Well, sorry that you actually had something to lose. Naruto spat, then sniffed. I'd have liked at least having that much. The blonde then saw Iruka, farther away in the corridor. He couldn't deal with him at the moment, not with the tears coming. Screw it, he swore as he turned. I didn't come here for insults like that. I'm outta here, he said as he pushed the doors open. If he had looked back, however, he might have been surprised at the look on Kiratori's face, and at the shame clearly visible there. Prank Day 66, Kurenai sighed as the coast of Wave Country came up. It seemed that her team had dodged the so-called C-rank curse, at least. Kurenai wasn't one to believe those kinds of superstitions generally, but her own first C-rank ended up involving the hot water nobility, a renegade ninja clan, and a hidden chapter of the Church of Jashin. And worse was, she wasn't the only one. Most of her fellow Jonins had stories like that, somehow. Too much to be a coincidence. She'd still be careful anyhow. No enemies on the coast or in sight, Sensei, Hinata said, her Byakugan shutting down. Good to see that the security measures she'd drilled into her team were respected too. The female Jonin was surprised to see that the atmosphere in Wave was, well, festive or jubilant would have been the description she'd have used. Rumors on the grapevine said that Wave was going through a bad economic period, with rampant poverty and famine, but that wasn't what she was seeing. There were people feasting and dancing in the streets, and when she asked a passerby, he said that this had already been going on for a few days. The island's inhabitants welcomed back Tazuna like an old friend, which was visibly not what the old man had been expecting, with claps on the back and promises to help the latter's bridge. The man was clearly surprised, and excused himself quickly to return home. It was there that the whole story came out. Tazuna had hired a genin team as protection from Gato, the shipping magnate having hold of the region. Only, the word was that Gato had done something to get ninjas after him. Official word was of a hidden spirit village, whatever that was, and the man's head was found without the rest of his body 3 days ago. There were some issues with Gato's hired thugs in town, but one of the villagers made a deal with a mercenary company here in Wave looking for work. That group, the Torison, made sure Gato's former swords for hire kept to themselves and obeyed the law. There had been only a single death, a thug who tried taking liberties with someone's daughter. Whatever happened then, the rest were staying calm. Kurenai saw a few of their members patrolling. Clearly samurai, especially in the way they walked. The top knot was also a big clue. Hinata said they had strong chakra networks, which might have indicated some former ninja training, but no self-respecting ninja would wear bright orange and red like these guys did. She stayed in town with her genin until the construction was finally complete as their contract stated, then left using said bridge. By then, the celebrations were mostly done. The bridge ended up being named the Great Freedom Bridge, in honor of Wave's recent liberation. Seeing her team walk to Konoha healthy and unharmed made her finally start to relax. She felt silly to have ever believed a superstition like that. Prank Day 68. Uzumaki-san, can I see you for a moment? Katori asked as soon as Naruto entered the academy. Naruto had been afraid of that. This was the first day he was in since he'd ranted to the man, and he had to say he was afraid of his reaction. Still, he had to face the music. Sure. My office, please, the teacher indicated with a hand. Look, about that rant. Naruto started as soon as the two were alone in the man's office, only to receive the hand sign for stopping. The teacher then bowed. You have nothing to say, Uzumaki-san. It is I who must make excuses, Katori intoned, voice clear and serious. I have shamed my family by both actions and words, and restitution must be done. You were correct in your argument. You have lost as much if not more than I did, and by ignoring your losses I have dishonored mine. You have my most sincere apologies for this deplorable conduct of mine. Please accept the regrets of an old man who should have known better. Naruto didn't know what to say. Well, it's in the past, right? He said with a smile. The future's more important, don't you think? Indeed it is, Katori answered as he rose from his bow, the ghost of a smile on his lips. This was the most he'd seen on the man, except when training as Muramaru. You are most wise for your age. Oi! The blonde replied. You can stop with the polite talk, you know. I feel like I'm doing something wrong when you talk to like that. Yup, definitely a smile. I will try. Now, I won't be holding you back from your classes. I will see you later today in weapon class. See you then, Naruto said, opening the office door. And thank you, Katori added softly as Naruto walked out. 'Twas nothing, the blonde replied as the door closed behind him. That day's weapon-throwing lesson was the most productive Naruto ever had. Prank Day 71. After more than 80 days to train, the Naruto Council finally declared the Jutsu competition closed, and the groups had to present their results. The last place members were already known. The Earth Ninjutsu team had tried everything, but they'd made no progress in months. They took their defeat in good grace, knowing they'd been out from the running from the start. The Wind group went next. A trio of clones stood in the zone delimited for testing, backs together, and started a spiraling wind around them, coming from the ground. It took barely a minute, but by that time the spiral had grown into a tornado with the 3 clones as the eye. It was clearly powerful, as all the clones could feel the pull from where they were standing, dozens of meters away. The funnel was carrying an enormous mass of sand and stone, which was grinding both floor and ceiling. One of the bunchins inside the eye had even released a kunai trailing paper, so that everyone might see how fast the wind was turning. It was basically a blur. Then they started moving. Slowly, but moving nonetheless. All the bunchins watching clapped at the display. Sure, it wasn't mastered in any sense of the term, but the group had made great strides. The clapping did not stop when the wind calmed and the tornado vanished, barely a minute later. Good, the real Naruto said. I suppose it was originally meant for a single ninja to perform, right? The Wind team nodded. How long can you make it last? Naruto asked. 8 minutes the record right now, with the average around 6.5, a member of the Wind test responded. A few more weeks of work and we'll hit a consistent 10-minute mark. Perfect, the original said, turning to the still waiting teams. Next up. The Lightning team ended up going next. Once again 3 clones stepped into the designated arena, one of them holding what the rest supposed were props. The clone in the middle stepped up. Well, our technique is from the Iruka clan, and I'm pretty sure everyone here knows what that means. A chorus of nods answered him. Iruka techniques tended to be deadly to the user, normally only useful as last resorts. So finding a way to show our results was difficult. Anyway, here it is. He then nodded to the 2 copies beside him, and got out of the way. The clone holding the bag withdrew from its depths a length of wire with lights every few inches, and in a single move extended it upwards while holding down both ends. The other quickly ran through hand signs. Right-un, Saishu Hoden, he yelled, grabbing both ends of the cable. There was an intense flash of light which barely lasted a second, then the sound of glass breaking as the lamps overloaded near instantly. The bunshin performing the technique was smoke, and the other had dropped the line and was blowing on his hand as if to cool them down. The cable fell on the ground an instant later, now a bubbling mess of plastic and metal. The clapping was much less present this time. The real blonde looked around at the other members of his council, who nodded. It works, that can't be denied. He had to agree though that the presentation could have been better, even if he had no clue how that could be achieved. It was something of a letdown after the wind team's tornado. The water team, who came afterwards, wasn't a much better show. They did show the technique against a wave of thrown weapons, which was good, but not much more than that. The clone performing the technique blew all the weapons away with a single casting, but was gone as soon as the burst of water settled to the ground. He hadn't even been touched. Is that normal? Ichibo asked from his spot on Naruto's head. Not from what we read of the technique, no, but that's the result we've always had, one of the members of the water group answered. We can make the technique work, true, but we haven't found how to limit how much chakra it takes. And it takes everything. Can you show us again? The clone incarnating Ariko asked. Another clone performed the technique, this time aiming straight up. Naruto had to say the sheer mass of water was impressive. The jutsu created more than 10 times the mass of a clone in liquid. But again, the bunshin was gone afterwards. Last team! Naruto shouted. A pair of clones shot over the crowd to land in the testing zone, one from each side. The first was a mirror image of the only picture the Naruto clones had of a Iruka. White blonde hair going past the ears, striped hat with a Konoha headband on it, black kimono and geta. The other, while not impersonating a specific person, was clearly an Uchiha. He had the fan symbol, the effeminate face, the black hair tied in the back and Sasuke's patented scowl. The fake Uchiha then blew a stream of fire at his foe. The Iruka didn't shy away, making hand seals with precision. Katan Akaraka Jugoki. Before his then extended hand appeared a black ball a feet wide, and a second later the flames vanished, sucked into the sphere. But they weren't done. The pair started what was visibly a scripted battle, but still impressive. With a background of cheers and clapping, the 2 transformed shinobi dodged and attacked. The Uchiha mainly used fireballs, shuriken and kunai, along with trying to take the battle to melee range. The Iruka let nothing land. He evaded the projectiles, absorbed every fire attack coming his way, and even managed a kawamiri along with the sphere when his enemy was too close. Then, once the Iruka had manipulated the fake Uchiha into position, he tossed the sphere right into the flames his opponent was shooting. They were collected like all the others had been. Unable to dodge, the Uchiha tried to block the coming ball. The moment he was touched, the sphere vanished, releasing an enormous bloom of flame. The Iruka had to do a kawamiri to save himself as his position was overtaken by the burst of fire. The flame lasted but a single moment, but the heat remained. The stone floor was melted in a great circle 20 meters wide, and the water the previous team had generated had vanished into steam. The Iruka came back, another sphere in hand. With it, he absorbed the heat remaining, and continued the presentation, along with 2 clones who joined him. They tossed each other spheres as if they were playing with balls like children, then formed a line and broke their balls purposely, this time releasing a stream of flame straight up. Then they bowed. The crowd went wild with cheers and clapping. Not only did they have the best presentation, but they clearly mastered their technique to a higher level than the others did. Even though he was pretty sure he didn't need to, the original looked at his fellow council members for approval. All he got were nods and thumbs up. "It is official!" he cried out. The winners of the first clone jutsu competition are the fire team, with Katan, Akiraka Jigoki, Congratulations. The cheering doubled as this was said, and much shaking of hands and back clapping ensued. The defeated teams took their losses with good grace, admitting they had been bested all the way. They joined in the merriment. It was only an hour later that the real Naruto managed to talk with a member of the group. Good work, he said. The victory was well deserved. How did you manage the last part, the streams of fire? There was nothing in the scrolls about that. Controlled failure, that's how it's done, the Bunshin answered. You stop maintaining a portion of the sphere, while keeping the rest. The flame inside rushes out of the hole, but anything that gets close to the remains of the sphere gets reabsorbed, then shot out again. Makes for a more condensed or controlled burst. There's probably more forms we can make, but that's the only one we actually managed in time. Maybe in the future. Controlled failure at. Naruto said in his mind. That's something to think about. Prank Day 73. For the second time in a week, Naruto was intercepted by a teacher at the entrance of the academy. This time, however, it wasn't something he'd been afraid of. Iruka was there waiting for himself, and with quick hand signs he instructed the blonde to follow him. So, what's up, sensei? He asked as soon as they were alone. Iruka smiled. Two things. First, did you look at the two other properties whose deeds I took from Shinobi Archival? Sure. If you had to keep one, which one would you? Naruto thought for a moment. The Himitsu place, for sure. Why not the Kaihotiki compound? It's certainly bigger. The Chunin asked. It's too open, which would be a problem with all my clones, Naruto explained. The Himitsu place is closer to Ariko's house, also. There was a moment of silence. Why did you ask? I did tell you I would be using one of these places, right? Naruto nodded. Well, the class has an upcoming practical on stealth and trap evasion, so I thought that would be a perfect time to make use of the third deed. Ah, again? Naruto whined. They're boring. I think I could have done the last one blindfolded. Iruka was about to rebuke his charge, then thought about it. Naruto did have a perfect score the last time this exercise was done, and the time before also. He turned to the blonde. You think they're too easy? Hell yeah. I replied, then realized he swore. I mean, it's not even a challenge. Naruto was well known to have pranked even the Hokage and the ANBU various times, so after that Iruka could understand the academy course not being a challenge. Then he realized that he had here an opportunity to make this test better. Actually, Naruto, how about being on the other side of the test this time? Your trap-setting ability is among the highest in class, and I think some more practical experience would be just what you need. And that would fix a little of Naruto's complaints of always having to do the same exact classes over again. Really? Could I do some improvements to the course? Naruto replied, surprise evident in his voice. The smile that popped up when Iruka nodded was beaming. That would be great. Meet me there tonight at 8 then, and we'll go over it. Now to class. Bell rings in 2 minutes. Naruto nodded avidly and dashed out, while Iruka smiled internally. Would the rest of the class hate his guts after this? Probably. Would it make them better ninjas? Quite possibly. Would it be hilarious? Assuredly. Naruto was in front of the building at 8 sharp. So, how's it gonna be, sensei? Iruka smiled, and this particular example was quite a bit meaner than usual. I've thought about it some more and decided to give you free rein, with a couple of instructions. The teacher said. I'll be rating your work and adding it as extra credit for the general ninja knowledge final. Naruto deserved those points. Yes, yes, yes! Naruto exclaimed. Now, what are the rules? Nothing lethal, nothing dangerous, the Chunin explained. We want them to learn from this. Blunted shuriken or kunai are basically the maximum allowed in terms of actual damage. The teacher raised a second finger. An increasing level of difficulty as one goes deeper, because we want to test how long they last before falling to a trap. Third finger. Clearly visible results, as we want them to realize what they did wrong. The Chunin thought for an instant. That's pretty much it. Now, do you need any specific equipment? When is the test going to be? Naruto asked. 3 days from now. Naruto smirked. How about I check things up today and bring you a list at the academy tomorrow? That will be fine. Iruka answered. Now, do you need me for anything? The blonde shook his head. No. I'll be starting right now. Iruka waved. I'll be waiting for the list then. Do good work. For sure. Being allowed to prank the entire class, with the teacher's approval? That deserved his best effort. He turned and went right in, while Iruka left toward his home. Prank Day 75. The katana the clone was holding clattered to the ground as it burst. Miyamoto shaked at his own blade, then turned toward the real Naruto who was waiting beside them, looking at the match. The rabbit sat Saiza. What mistake did your clone do this time? The academy student scratched the back of his head. Geez, I don't know. You just went straight to the offensive and punched right through. Footing, the samurai replied. I could easily see his feet were placed improperly. Had your clone's position been secure, he could have easily dodged my charge. As such, 1 hour of the fourth kata, with 20 clones. Ah man! Naruto said, but still generated the needed clones. They took position 2 hand spans from each other, and started doing the kata over and over. After a minute of such work, Miyamoto spoke again. Naruto, with me. The real boy stepped out from the group. Yes? Show me to those blades you have, the rabbit said. Naruto led him to the warehouse they used for weapons. There, on one of the walls, was every weapon they'd gotten their hands on, including most of those from Wave. The rest were in the hands of the Torisan as they pretended to be a mercenary group. Naruto, the rabbit explained. You are getting near the point where you will have to choose a specific weapon. While a good samurai can fight with any sword he ends up with, his personal weapon should be like another hand to him, an extension of his body. He should know instinctively how far it reaches and much it weighs, how it cuts the air and leaves its sheath. This familiarity can only happen after extensive training with only this single blade, he continued. I have an exercise in mind, but you need to choose your own sword first. Naruto looked around at the many swords on the wall. Some were prettier than others, some longer, but he found he couldn't make a choice. He had no knowledge of what made a sword better than another unless it was evident. Do you have any suggestions? Naruto finally asked. Like? I know nothing really about swords. What would you recommend? Miyamoto nodded, then went to the wall and started examining the weapons there. Some he passed without a word, some he simply unsheathed, and the few others he actually took in hand and wielded. In the end, he brought 5 swords forward. These are the best amongst those you have. The 5 were clearly different. Any special characteristics? The rabbit placed the 5 on the ground. All of them are well made, of good steel, but like you saw there are differences. He indicated the first one. This is the longest, not a katana but a daito. It is heavier than I would personally prefer, something which increases cutting power but makes it more tiring to use. He pointed to the 2 next. These 2 are nearly identical, and I suspect from the same maker. Well balanced, not too light or too heavy. He went to the next. A beautifully made blade, and solid too. The pommel is longer than usual, which makes it easier to use with 2 hands. It does, however, change the balance of the sword. He then put his hand on the last. A very light blade, narrower than usual. Very fast, but much less effective against armor due to the lack of weight. He then looked straight at Naruto. At this point, it is your choice, based on your personal style. Each has its advantages and disadvantages. Naruto thought for a good moment, then reached for one of the 2 similar blades. This one, I think. It is a valid choice, Miyamoto replied. May I ask what prompted it? Naruto grabbed the blade beside it. You said these 2 are near identical, right? The rabbit nodded. Then, should something happen to this one, changing to the other wouldn't require too much time to master. Correct, and a valid point, Miyamoto said, nodding. Now let us return downstairs and continue your training. The 4th kata once more. What about that exercise you spoke about? Naruto asked. It will have to wait for a full day of training, the rabbit said with a slight smile. And we will need access to the forests around Konoha. Anything I should know? The boy asked. Miyamoto was silent for a moment. Just prepare yourself for much running and blocking. That didn't raise Naruto's hopes much. Prank Day 76. Today was a day that had been depressing for Naruto the past 3 years. Today was the start of the Chunin exam. The blonde couldn't help but think that, if things had been different, he would currently be participating. He could be showing everyone how awesome he was, and coming one step closer to his ultimate goal. And the fact that, this time, the exam was in Konoha didn't help. At least he had something to fall back on. Today was also the day Iruka was testing everyone in stealth and trap avoidance, and he'd be able to pit his talents against those of his classmates, albeit in a different way. Iruka stepped up beside him. "Everything ready?" he asked. The blonde nodded. "All the traps are armed and the scrolls are in place. Only thing left is for me to get inside." "Why's that?" "Someone will need to reset everything between each attempt, right?" The teacher nodded. "That'll be me." "I would have thought some of your clones would already be inside managing that," Iruka replied. Naruto shook his head. "Better not. I wouldn't want the fact that I can do clones to become public knowledge, not right now." "Time to get in position, then," Iruka said. "Katori's on his way with the class right now." Hi, Captain," Naruto replied with a smile and a military salute. Then he disappeared inside the building. "Welcome everyone," Iruka said, standing in front of the whole class, Katori beside him. "Today is an exam day. Inside this building is a scroll like the one I'm holding right here." He indicated the scroll in his hand. "With your name on it. You are to infiltrate this place silently, dodge the many traps inside, and return. You will be ranked, in order, in stealth, trap avoidance, and speed. Anyone has questions?" "Not this thing again," one of the students in the back whined, one of the returning ones. "It's way too easy." General murmurs of agreement followed. "I would be careful about not treating this course as the one from the previous year," Iruka said with a smirk. "This time the traps have been designed and placed by a specialist. Those who aren't careful will fall prey to what's inside." Actually, based on the list he'd been given, they were going to be in for a rude shock. Even Iruka had no clue how some of the things Naruto had requested were going to be used. Blunted kunai, shinobi wire, bells, firecrackers, they were expected. Paper, glue, paint and indelible ink were normal. But 8 dozen eggs? A specific brand of vegetable oil? Toothpicks and an ink stamp? The teacher didn't know what to expect with that. And those weren't everything. "Yeah, right," Iruka continued as if there had been no comment. "Students waiting for their turns will be training under Katori's orders, and will come for their attempt when called. Afterwards they will come see me for a review. There will be no telling other what to expect. Joden Ariko, you are first up." Iruka wanted the ones who'd do best to go first, to keep the surprise as long as possible. It took a good 15 minutes before Ariko returned, and even she did not come back unmarked. There was a spot of paint, bright orange, of course, on her left shoulder, and her right hand was covered in ink. She didn't say much to Iruka, only grumbling silently about false explosive tags, and that she would talk to her progenitor about this. Iruka let it go, and sent her back to work with Katori. He sent Hyuga next, as he didn't want the 2 clones one directly after the other. With his bloodline talent, he would probably be the next best choice. He didn't do as well as Ariko had, and unlike her he'd clearly made enough noise to be detected due to the traps. Most evident on him was the word fail written in kanji on his brow, and like Ariko he had a hand covered in ink. He also was scratching himself profusely, probably due to itching powder. Iruka forced himself not to laugh as he gave recommendations. Muramaru went next, and he clearly had a different plan. He rushed in and was back in less than 5 minutes, though covered in paint and the like. Iruka had to give him a thumbs up at that. It was a good way of keeping the 2 clones different. He sent the returning Tatsujin Hiroshi next, and smiled at Naruto's success. The class was more than halfway done when Katori came up to Iruka. "This test seems more rigorous than the one I remember going through." Iruka smirked. "The trap specialist I hired is well known for being very creative in his designs." The taijutsu specialist had a look around. "I do not seem to see Uzumaki-san here. Did he already pass and leave, or did he decide to skip this exam?" With how dirty the students ended up after doing the exam, most ended up being sent home. "None of the above," Iruka said seriously. "Naruto is currently doing makeup work instead of this particular test. His last notes on the subject implied he was better doing remedial work instead of redoing an exam he aced multiple times." Just now, another student came out. This one was fully orange, had feathers stuck to his head and was clanking due to a bucket stuck to his foot. He was also missing his other sandal. "Indeed," Katori said. "Very creative remedial work." The implied meaning was clear. "I suppose you will be testing his efforts afterwards." Iruka nodded. "That is indeed the plan." Would you appreciate another opinion? The head teacher thought for a moment. Regardless of what he'd stumbled on more than a week ago, Katori was a consummate professional. He had also been on actual missions more often and for a longer period than he had. Higher-level missions, too. I would be honored, he answered. It was past 4 when the last student went through. None had come out unscathed, though Ariko and the last members to go through, which included the rest of her gang, tended toward longer times and less marks, being more careful after all the failures. All the students were then sent home, at least a few still present. Only then did Iruka knock on the door. Come out, Naruto. The blonde appeared in less than a minute. So, how did I do? I'm sure the students will pay a lot more attention to trap detection in the future, Iruka replied. Indeed, Katori added. I suspect the students will not forget this exam, and will be much more careful in their future careers. Now, we will be testing your work. Both of you? Naruto said, pointing. The two teachers nodded. Together? Iruka shook his head. No, each in turn. Give me 2 minutes to reset everything, then one of you can go. Iruka was the first, and after the 2 minutes had passed. As he had asked, the entrance hall and the first corridor only had the classic traps, tripwire, kunai launchers, even a pit trap somehow. Well hidden, sure, but nothing special. Any student who fell for one of those deserved to fail, as they'd been studying those types of traps since day one. The tricky one started at the end of the second corridor. The first difficult trap Iruka nearly missed. Naruto had sprayed ink the same color as the door handle on said piece of furniture. The Chunin had just sidestepped 3 traps and stopped an inch before getting caught. And then it got tougher. First trap that caught Iruka was a simple step that did a slight clicking sound. The Chunin instantly jumped back, preparing himself for attack, but nothing came. He waited a minute, then rose again to start moving, only to find his sandals stuck to the floor, quick-drying glue having seeped from between the floorboards. He had to abandon them there. The Chunin suspected Naruto had hid the mission scroll downstairs, and the rising level of difficulty seemed to indicate he was right. He started getting more marks from close dodges and the like. By time he'd found the bookcase with the scroll, he'd had to catch a pair of eggs coming from both front and back simultaneously. He'd found the ink stamp with fail inscribed and had to block it, and had lost his socks to another glue trap, this one on the ceiling. By now, he was truly paranoid. He verified every inch of the room before even approaching the scroll, and found nothing. He checked the scroll from every angle and found nothing. Only then did he grab it, prepared for the worst. Nothing. Finally, he sighed and went back through the door, only to fall through a pit trap that hadn't been there before. Worse, there was itching dust at the bottom. Grumbling, Iruka made his way out of the trap and out of the building, this time managing not to fall for everything else. Naruto came out 2 minutes later. You can go now, Hyuujin-sensei. The teacher nodded and went in. So, how was it? Naruto asked. Beyond genin level, that's for sure, Iruka replied, dousing the itching powder off his feet with a water jutsu. I have no clue how some of these traps activated. Chakra triggers? Naruto smiled. Nope. I have no idea how to make those, and the Hyuga in the class would have noticed. How did you do it then? Weight triggers, mainly, Naruto explained. At Iruka's blank look, he continued. Things made to hold under normal weight, but activate under sudden pressure. He then started writing a design in the earth. Well, you're beyond me, Iruka finally said. I concur, Katori said, coming back out. I cannot rate you, Uzumaki-san. You are clearly better than any Chunin I know in this branch of the ninja arts, and I know of no jonin specialized in traps that might be able to evaluate you. My recommendation would be to talk to the Hokage about this place, and let him decide who could rate your talents. He brought out a piece of paper. Especially with those. That's an explosive tag, and it's primed. Iruka yelled. He might not be a sensor, but even he could detect that. No, it is not, Katori replied, while Naruto simply laughed. It's just a chakra-charged piece of paper, nothing else. He then withdrew another paper from his pocket. It's something I learned, 2 years ago I think, when I got my hand on a real explosive tag and tried copying it. He drew a circle in ink on the paper. A simple circle, right? Both teachers nodded. Naruto then pushed chakra into it. The circle holds chakra well. Make it big enough or make enough of them, and it'll feel like a normal explosive tag. He then added random characters in the style of a tag. Add the rest afterwards, and you have something that both looks and feels like a tag, and whose only danger is getting a paper cut. Iruka couldn't resist anymore. He started laughing. Wahahoho! And I made sure to pass as far away from those as possible, not noticing that was your plan all along. Indeed, Katori added, and even he had a slight smile. Most effective. Even I was fooled, and by something so simple. The taijutsu teacher looked around. Now if you don't mind, we'll discuss the student scores another day. It is late, and the day has been long. I will see the both of you tomorrow. He then left. Naruto and Iruka quickly did the same, the teacher directing his pupil toward Ichiraku Ramen. His work deserved a suitable reward. Chapter 15 Sensei, Prank Day 79. Juné was coming back from making a delivery to the Shushuya bar when his path crossed someone he wasn't expecting. Uchiha Sasuke. And he wasn't alone, either. Following him around like a puppy, as usual, was Sakura, along with Sakaki, one of the members of his previous class. Behind them, with his nose in a book was, he supposed, their Jonin sensei Hatake Kakashi. He'd known for a while that these three were a team, as rumors propagated quickly in the ninja environment. If he'd passed, based on his exam scores, he'd probably have been placed with Sasuke and Sakura under the same Kakashi. There still wasn't a general agreement within the clones whether this would have been a good thing or a bad thing, i.e. if being on a team with the Uchiha Prince was worth being on Sakura's squad. Juné nearly went forward to meet her, but remembered at the last moment who he currently was incarnating. Then something came to mind. He remembered that Team 7, Sakura's team, had been nominated for the Chunin exams along with every other rookie team, and that the second part was currently being performed. The Naruto clones would have known if Sasuke's team had already passed, and in fact had just overheard people betting over who would make it to the third part. That mean that Sasuke had somehow failed in the first part. A smile rose on Juné's lips at the thought. Normally, thinking about the Chunin exam brought forth feelings of sadness, but the idea that Sasuke had failed at the very beginning made him feel good inside. Maybe the so-called prodigy would learn from the experience and become a better person. Nah. That'll never happen. As Team 7 turned toward the mission office, Juné continued on his path. He hoped that Choji, Shikamaru and Kiba had made it to the second part, and wished them good luck in it. Who knows, maybe he'd be able to see them fight in the third part if they made it. Prank Day 83. Once classes were done, there were often Narutos who left the base to go into Konoha proper. Some went to buy specific items of equipment, or prank tools, some went to other environments to train, like the forests surrounding the city, and some simply went around for a walk to rest their heads or think. Not all of them were underhand shither. The numbers were small enough that this hadn't caused any issue. By now, the news had made their rounds. Team 7 was the only rookie team not to have accessed the third exam. Both Choji and Kiba's team had made it, and were currently preparing for the last part of the test in a month. That was the reason why this Naruto clone wasn't surprised to see Hinata training alone in a field, striking relentlessly at a post. She was actually one of his former female classmates he preferred, especially from last year. Unlike everyone else, she focused on being an efficient ninja instead of chasing after boys like Sasuke. She was actually the only girl he could remember from that class that didn't have a crush on the Uchiha heir. He didn't remember having talked to her very often, but she at least deserved congratulations on getting to the last part of the exam. "Hey Hinata," the clone said as he approached. "Good work on making it to the last third of the tournament." Nah, Naruto?" she said, turning around instantly. Judging by how red was her face, she must have been training harshly for a good while. She then bowed deeply. "Thanks you for these kind words," she said, though her tone indicated that this was somewhat by rote. Hey, no need to bow to me," the Bunshin said. "I'm the one who should be bowing to you. You're nearly Chunin by now." She quickly rose, shaking her hands and head negatively. No, please don't," she replied, getting redder. "What can I do for you, Naruto?" "Nothing, just wanted to give my congratulations," the clone said, then realized Hinata was breathing hard. Harder than he thought was good for her. "You should rest a while, actually. You seem pretty out of it." Hinata lowered her face at those words. I can't. Actually, now that I think about it, you're from a big clan, correct?" The clone continued. "Why are you training alone in the fields when you could do so in the Hyuga compound?" "I can't train with members of the clan, Hinata muttered, voice low. What? The clone said, surprised. I can't do training in the compound, she said quite a bit more loudly, with unshed tears in the corners of her eyes. Slowly, the whole story came out. She was to face her cousin Niji in the first round of the final. She'd never defeated him in the past, and as such her father had ordered the clan not to waste time on Hinata while her father had taken his nephew under his wing. Nobody of the clan would go against such an order. Of course, she practiced with her own teacher, but Yuhi Kurenai was an illusion specialist, and illusions weren't going to be of much help against a prodigy with the Byakugan. Worse was that she had 3 different students in the finals, which meant she wasn't able to give her full time to any of them. Each had 4 hours of training each day with their jonin, but that wouldn't be enough to face her cousin. The clone stopped her when she started repeating the last conversation she had with Niji, along with the issues between the main clan and the branch house. He did so by saying 5 words, "Your father is an asshole." Hinata clamped up instantly, covering her mouth with her hands. I'm not joking, the Bunshin continued, completely serious. This is like the worst idea ever. If I had 2 kids fighting each of in the first round of the tournament, I wouldn't ignore one to make sure the other is as good as he can be. I'd train the both of them so hard that when the 2 met in the arena, they'd have a fight awesome enough that the judges would have no choice but to promote them both. Hinata couldn't help but release a small giggle at those words. See? He said. Even you know I'm right. She giggled again, then let her face fall. Hinata? The clone asked. I can't beat Niji, she replied. He's better, stronger, and faster than I am. Maybe I should just give up now and not shame myself in front of everyone. The clone's face went tense. Can you still walk? He asked sternly. What? Hinata replied, unsure. Can you still walk? The Bunshin repeated louder. Yes. Hinata squeaked. Can you still fight? The copy yelled even louder. Yes, she said, a little surer. Then, there is no giving up. Giving up is for when you can't move, when you can't fight. When nothing can be done. The clone looked at her in the eyes. And you still have a month in front of you to get better. There's still a lot that can change. Case to point, he'd personally gone from failing the academy to infiltrating it, with 3 different forbidden techniques, hundreds of clones and a summoning contract in less than a month. But, I can't do it, the Hyuga heiress muttered. Yes you can, and I'll help, the clone said. You will? She said, her face brightening like the rising sun. Then it fell once more. But what about the academy? I wouldn't want to hurt your chances at finally passing. With what all the various Narutos now knew about passing, they weren't afraid much. They trusted Iruka's words, and he said he'd go straight to the Hokage once the prank was done. Still, he couldn't tell Hinata that. So he went with something else. Hinata, can you keep a secret? He asked. The Hyuga heiress nodded. Can you swear it? I swear I will not reveal your secret, Hinata said solemnly. The clone nodded. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he invoked, generating another copy beside himself. Her eyes went wide, then blank as she called upon her bloodline. He's real, she said with some surprise. You can do the Kage Bunshin? The copy nodded once more. Yup. I learned it right after the last academy final. There won't be an issue with us training you, as you can see, the newest clone said. We can be in both places at once. Your clones last that long, Naruto? Hinata asked. Both Bunshins nodded. The both of us are clones, actually, the new one pointed out. Hinata said nothing, surprised once again. So, what were you training? The first clone asked. The main katas of the Gentle Fist? She answered, uncertain. The 2 Bunshins looked at each other before turning back to the Hyuga heiress. Didn't you say he was faster and better than you at it? She lowered her head. Yes. Whoa. Don't be ashamed. He'd got a head start, so of course he'll be better at some things, the second clone replied. What about ninjutsu? Anything mid-range or long-range? Her head stayed down. Outside shuriken and kunai, I don't have anything like that. What about him? Her head rose as she thought for a moment. Not that I know of. He's all taijutsu, outside the usual ninja tools. The first clone looked straight at the second. You thinking what I'm thinking? Matsuri? The clone nodded with a grin. Exactly. Matsuri? Hinata asked, upon when the two clones turned toward her. Her finger instinctively started pushing each other as she went redder once more. You have a pen and paper? She handed the clone the requested items. Meet us in 30 minutes at this place, he said, handing her the address. We'll get what you need. He turned to his fellow Naruto. You go get the scroll. I'll find us something to train with. The other clone nodded. Let's go. Less than a minute, she was back alone in the field. After a quick flash of her Byakugan revealed no one looking at her, she started dancing, lost to her fantasies. She had a date. With Naruto. Of course, it was for training and with a clone, but still date. With Naruto. She twirled around for a good 10 minutes before returning to reality. Naruto was counting on her. She wouldn't fail him. Naruto had chosen the Himitsu place for one good reason in particular. Like many ninja complexes, it contained an underground training room. Of course, the room had nothing on the Uruhara tunnels, but it was still large enough that a small group could easily train there. It was in that basement that the, now 3, Naruto clones brought Hinata to train. So what is Matsuri? Hinata asked, once again pushing her fingers together. Wano Matsuri, the first clone explained, is a combat style meant mainly for enclosed places. It's based on creating an environment under the user's control that's dangerous to opponents. It should be perfect for you in the arena. Sorry I'm late. Another clone said he entered the basement. Had a few issues finding what we needed. Managed getting approval from the boss though. You got them, right? The leading Bunshin asked. Of course. He then handed the leader a good dozen hoops made out of plastic. Hoops? The Hyuga heiress asked, surprised. Not really, but that's what we'll start training with, the clone replied. The real technique uses chakrams, but better to start with something a little less dangerous. Are you sure? I can learn this? Hinata asked, suddenly uncertain. Well, you have all the requirements. You're fast, graceful, precise, and those eyes of yours are a big advantage, the clone said. And since it was originally in Hyuga technique, I think it should only be right you learn it. Hinata's eyes went wide. You know one of my clan's techniques? The clones scratched the back of their heads. Well, not know it per se, but we have documentation on how it is performed. She thought for a moment. I've never heard of that technique, actually. She suddenly realized. As a potential heiress, there wasn't many documents that she couldn't access, and she knew at least the names of all the official techniques of the Hyuga clan. That's not surprising, since it was banned around the time your father was born, another of the Narutos, the one holding a scroll, explained. From what's written along with the style, one of the trainees hurt himself seriously while practicing, and the then current leader of the clan, who disliked the style since it had been created by a branch house member, used that opportunity to arrange for it to get forbidden, then banned it from being used by the clan. Its creator and her team then died a few months later under bizarre circumstances. A female branch house member? Hinata asked. The clone nodded. Yes. The note says she was both unsatisfied by the Juken and not particularly talented in its use. He raised the hoops in his hand. Want to try? She nodded a little. She wasn't going to give up, not right in front of Naruto. What do I do? The clone passed a few hoops to each of his brothers. It's simple for now. We'll throw these at you, sometimes bouncing them off the wall. Your job is to grab them by the inside like so. He indicated the proper grip with one of the hoops he held. And throw them back at us as quickly as possible. Should I use my eyes? She asked. She meant the Byakugan, of course. The clone nodded. Of course. It's gonna be all of us against you, so you have to start with some advantage. Also, these things aren't as fast as the real thing, but they'll do until we manage to get some real ones. Hinata took a deep breath and placed herself instinctively in the beginning position of the Juken. I'm ready. A trio of hoops came right at that moment, from 3 different directions. She grabbed the first and dodged the other 2, throwing it straight back at one of the clone. Her target was expecting it and dodged, grabbing it once it bounced back. 2 more came, then another 3. She managed to grab 2 that time and threw them back with little results. Still more came. Slowly, she started getting in the pattern. First it was calculating the bounces in advance. Then she realized that she could do better by spinning to preserve as much of the hoop's momentum as possible. She then started using indirect attacks instead of direct ones, and those found much more success. So, the Naruto's upped the ante. More clones, more hoops flying around. Hinata's movements became crisper and faster, more fluid as the minutes passed. Even better, she found that she was having fun. There was none of the rigidity of the Juken in this style. It was more grace and precision instead of speed and directness. She started smiling as the hoops flew around, dodging them by centimeters and redirecting them when necessary. She felt more in control than she had ever been, and she liked the feeling. Stop throwing them and catch them now, the leading clone ordered, dodging a hoop. Hi, Sensei. Hinata replied instinctively, a smile on her face. She started keeping those she grabbed, slowly piling them on her forearms. The numbers in the air diminished slowly, but after 5 more minutes she had all the hoops on her arms. So, how was it? The leader asked. She simply bowed deeply. Thank you for the lesson, Sensei, she said with a smile. I found the exercise quite fun, actually, she added. Look at your arms, another of the clones said. She did so, not knowing why. Then a second later she realized that there were a lot of hoops there, a lot more than she expected. 10, 20, 30, 68 hoops? She said, surprised. We had a copy outside cloning more, just to see if you could handle it, a bunshin in the back said. For a small room like this one, more than 60's a lot. With a month's training, I think you'll do a good enough showing in the tournament, the leader continued. And that won't be all. There's other tricks that will help you get the most out of that month. Hinata bowed deeply once more. Teach me, Sensei, she said enthusiastically. Look up, the leading clone said, placing his hands in the seal the Naruto bunshins used the most often. This seal is the main seal for the Kage Bunshin Jutsu, he explained with a smile. Prank Day 87. Living as Iruka was quite a difference to Naruto. He'd not thought about it before the prank, but there were serious differences between how groups of men and groups of women treated each other. While they'd been more schoolmates than true friends, Naruto had still gone out with Choji, Kiba and Shikamaru a number of times. They had fun, true, but there was always some form of competition underneath it all, especially from Kiba. Naruto had sparred with him and Choji often enough to know that. Shikamaru was different, but still a challenge, this time in making the least effort. There wasn't any of that in the group he currently hanged with. The Konoha Fashion Ninja, as they called themselves, didn't compete much. Fumichi was the leader and everyone accepted that, falling in line behind her. There were none of the power games he'd seen between Ino and Sakura. Everyone had their own specialties, their own places where they excelled, and that seemed to be enough. As an example, in the last kunai throwing exams, Iruka had ranked highest among the group, highest in the class, actually. Where between guys there would be a reluctant good work, or more likely a enjoy your victory while you can. Between the girls it was all great job, not surprising, and I'll know who to ask for help. And they meant it too. Not that the Naruto clone was the best everywhere. In the traditional kunoichi arts, she trailed behind the rest of the group. Still, they had no issue in explaining court manners or flower language, along with whatever else was needed. The bunshin was learning quite a bit there, though not what she preferred. At least, it might help her infiltration skills. There were also other domains where one or another member excelled. Like Mihoshi and ninjutsu. No, no, no! Mihoshi exclaimed, looking at the nearly transparent clone Asano had made. It didn't even last half a minute. You gotta put more into it. More and more until you get something real, something usable. Only then can you start trying to scale it back. Yeah, but it's tiring. Asano whined. The tall girl's clone chose that moment to vanish completely, leaving only smoke behind. Better to be tired in peace than dead in war, my parents always say, Mihoshi replied, idly taking her long black hair out of her face. She was the only one of the group to have ninja parents, and even if the Okita weren't part of a clan they had trained their daughter effectively. Now again. Hi. Asano answered. Mihoshi then made her way before Iruka, who made a single normal clone. It turned out exactly like the one from Naruto's last attempt at passing, blank-faced and falling over itself sick in a second. Actually, Iruka was pretty sure this one lasted even less time than the two she'd made then. The second-generation ninja inclined her head in confusion. That's new, she said diplomatically. They always do that for some reason, the female Naruto clone replied dejectedly. Can you do 3 more? Mihoshi asked. I want to see it again. Iruka did as asked, creating 3 in one shot. This trio had more color, true, but still fell over sick right as they appeared. Is it just me? Mihoshi asked. Or did these 3 last as little bit longer? It wasn't only her. Ariko was pretty sure the clone had survived longer than the previous batch. It's not just you. Mihoshi nodded. Try 10. It was even more evident with 10. The 10 were nearly looking healthy, and while they crouched somewhat and held their stomachs, they weren't vanishing like the ones before. Further tests revealed the clones were normal looking starting at 14, and really usable at 19. Well, we have a starting point, at least, Mihoshi said. Ariko nodded. The Bunshins had been training non-stop on the various techniques they'd decided on, and they'd slowly but surely improved. Now that she had a starting point, she could work at it and get better. Thank you? Mihoshi smiled. Glad to help. Now, if you don't mind, I'll go see Nishi again. She's still having issues. Go. I'll work at it on my side. Ariko dispelled her clones as Mihoshi walked away. The shadow clone might be better, but they needed to get this version working if they really wanted to pass. So she extended her fingers in the ram seal and started once more. Bunshin no Jutsu. Prank Day 89. Naruto rolled the dice in front of him. 6 4 4 1 3 5. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He invoked, his hands automatically making the cross seal required. Nothing happened. He then waited. Like he'd done before, he was training in the Kage Bunshin. He wasn't trying to improve solidity anymore. No, he was trying the very opposite. He was trying to update everyone's memories without making a clone. As the real Naruto, he was the only one who could effectively train in this. Using the normal Kage Bunshin had a number of issues if used only for updating memories. First, it was a waste of chakra, which while not applicable to himself as the living one, was a problem for the many Bunshins. Second was time, as precious seconds were wasted making the clone kill itself, or dispelling him. In battle, that could be the difference between life and death. But mainly, it was an issue of stealth. Creating a clone was very visible, and there had been times where Bunshins had nearly been discovered because of that. If they could refresh every clone's memories with a simple hand sign, it would make the infiltrators both more efficient at sending updates, and less likely to be noticed. A clone knocked on the door Naruto was in. The original went and opened it, crossing his fingers. Code? He asked. 644135, the clone answered. We have it, right? Right. Naruto smiled. It seems that yes, we finally have it. Go join the people training downstairs, I'm going to try again just to confirm. The copy nodded and left, closing the door behind him. The setup was simple. Naruto would roll the dice to get a random code, then perform the technique. If everything went correctly, the many clones in the next room would get the code, and send someone over with it. The dice were simply to have something random, something that couldn't be guessed. There had been many errors, clones missing body parts, tiny clones, some prodigious bursts of short-lasting smoke, and even a bizarre Naruto Bunshin with no memories. But it seemed he finally had it. This time, however, he didn't roll anything. Code, Sasuke with Sakura's pink hair. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He waited the requisite second, and opened the door when someone knocked. Did you send in an abnormal code, boss? Say it. Naruto replied. Sasuke with Sakura's pink hair, the clone intoned. That's it, right? The real Naruto's grin was all the answer he needed. Still, Naruto did the technique 3 more times, just to make sure he could perform it without mistakes. It went without a hitch. He then had various clones do updates, just to make sure the technique spread within the group. Ariko, Miromaru, the merchant heads. He basically had every single important clone do the technique and waited for their update. An update they did? He did, however, start having an issue with the clones further away. It sometimes took 2-3 times before he got a reply. Discussion with his other clones revealed that this wasn't the technique's failing, but something else. Some clones got the update, some didn't. Naruto had been afraid of that. After the problems he'd had with the returning grass team, he suspected there were limits to the memory transferal effect of the technique. Now, he had confirmation. Well, at least he'd have something else to work on regarding the Kage Bunshin. Prank Day 90, again. Naruto ordered. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Hinata intoned, clearly putting her all into it. Her fingers flashed in the cross seal, and a new Hinata appeared beside the first. The second Naruto in the room reached out and shook the new clone's hand. "It's good," he said. "This one's solid enough." It had been a week since the academy student had started training the Hyuga Genin. A long week where they worked on the shadow clone whenever Hinata had enough chakra, and the Matsuri otherwise. Naruto had hoped Hinata would get the technique quickly to maximize her training, but still it took 7 days. Worst part was, if one counted attempts, Hinata had him beat. It had taken 2 hours for Naruto to finally manage the technique, but that was at around 5 to 6 attempts a minute. At her best, Hinata managed 1 a minute, and that steadily went downward as the day went on. It was visible she was giving her best, with the number of times she fainted trying, but it seemed her reserves couldn't take it. Naruto had known he had more chakra to spare than anyone in his class, but he didn't think the disparity was that wide. He knew better now. The Hyuga ninja took in great gulps of air. "Now, what, sensei?" The 2 Uzumaki clones looked at each other, then nodded. "Now your clone comes with me in the next room. She's gonna be learning the techniques attached to the Matsuri," the first clone said, indicating the door. "While you're going to stay with me and we're going to start on the next phase of your Matsuri training." The second Naruto continued while his partner took the clone out of the room. "Next phase?" Hinata said, still regaining her breath. The clone went in the corner of the room and brought out a single package. "This time, we'll be using these." He handed the wrapped objects to her. Out of breath as she was, she didn't have the energy to go at it delicately. She ripped the paper off, revealing 6 sharp rings of metal, tied together in simple ropes. "Those are," she started. "Those are the real thing, true chakrams," the Bunshin explained. "They're simply made, true, but they'll do the job." Those were only the first batch. The clone network had orders all over Fire Country for them. By the time the tournament came, they should at least have 100 of them, if not more. They're beautiful," Hinata replied. As an heir, she'd gotten numerous gifts over the years, but none had the meaning behind them this one had. Naruto believed in her so much that he was spending his own money to help her. It made her feel warm inside. She took a deep breath, then rose to her feet. "I'm ready for more, sensei!" she exclaimed, cutting off the ropes and grabbing the chakrams in her hands. "Careful with those," the clone said. "They're sharp, trust me." One of the clone had burst simply from handling them. "Anyway, we're gonna go slow, getting you used to them. Try to see how they fly, how they bounce. We'll go to true sparring later." He made a cross seal, and 6 more clones appeared around him. "Ready? Let's dance." "Hi!" she replied, launching one from each hand. They were heavier, but flew straighter and bounced at a different angle. 2 more were thrown, then she dodged one returning and grabbed the second, throwing it back instinctively. As the chakrams bounced everywhere and her feet twirled on the floor, she smiled. This was the best week of her life, going on the best month. She hoped it never ended. Prank Day 92, Jumpers did not have a set schedule. Since they went back and forth so often, night and day had become meaningless. They tended toward sleeping only when they arrived at their destination, and that was when they didn't work through the night. That meant there could be jumpers coming around at any time during the day. Akero, tradition was the jumpers took names from colors, if they didn't already have one, was a clone descending from those sent to Tea Country. He'd chosen the jumper lifestyle, preferring to see places rather than do infiltration. It wasn't his first trip back to Konoha. He'd carried back some spices for Tuchi's first order. By now he was used to traveling the Iruka hidden paths, and could agree that smuggling had been one of their main purposes. His target was simple: the civilian clones, representing the Naruto Council, had managed to get a lease on some of the space in the one warehouse the Iruka tunnels connected to. This was perfect as it allowed the clones to come and go as needed. Akero was supposed to have arrived late in the evening, but he miscalculated on how much chakra he had. He'd been forced to make a stop for a few hours to replenish his reserves, and that was why he was running the tunnels past midnight. He was surprised to see light coming from the trapdoor at the end of the path, as the warehouse was usually sparsely lighted, but paid it no mind, thinking there was someone else working late. There was also a bizarre smell to the air. Then he stepped into an inferno. There was fire everywhere, floor to ceiling. On the side, crates were happily burning while pots exploded and boxes burst. Akero reacted instantly. He dashed into the corner reserved in Janae's name, dodging flames and burning debris, and found a single clone there, holding up a black ball. That was the only reason their corner had been spared until now. We got to get this fire out. I can't move. The clone, another jumper with the unfortunate name of Nutu, yelled back. After a second of observation, he saw why. Nutu was moving his sphere back and forth, draining the flames all around their cargo, and the spots he left quickly got filled again by more fire. Since the boxes did contain alcohol, even too much heat might be dangerous. The jumper thought for an instant. Creating more clones wasn't really doable, as they'd burst into smoke in an instant. Another sphere would help, but he didn't believe it would be enough, not at the speed the fire was going. Creating water wouldn't fix this, as it wouldn't be enough while bursting him. He messaged everyone, but he didn't think help was going to be fast enough. Escape was the only valid option. Cover me! Akero yelled, sliding to the crates. He didn't wait, withdrawing a scroll from his pocket and sealing the first container he found. Then the second. Then the third. He thanked whoever was listening that jumpers always carried numerous storage scrolls on themselves. Sealing everything took a minute, which was the longest minute of his life. By then, the ceiling had started giving up the ghost, so Akero dashed back into the tunnels under the protection of Nutu's sphere. Only then did he take a breath. Other clones started appearing in the following minutes. Not many, since most were asleep, but enough. Akero quickly ordered this tunnel filled, as the fire would probably lead to an investigation, and the tunnels being found wasn't something they could deal with. The ladder was removed and shovels were quickly found as the tunnel was packed tight with dirt. As he did so, Akero couldn't help but think. He didn't think this was a coincidence, not with a fire that hot. There was clearly something fishy going on in Konoha. Chapter 16, Rat Smelling Rat. Prank Day 92. Tucci found Janae beside the charred remains of the warehouse in the morning. Hello, Jisei-san? I've heard. Are you okay? The Naruto Bunshin nodded. Any losses? Not much. Nothing that can't be replaced, the clone said, turning toward the chef. There had been some damaged products from the heat, though very little. This happens often? Not really, but it isn't the first time, Tucci answered. When the others said they faced setback after setback, this is the kind of thing they meant. It's rarely one specific event, but a number of issues like this one. And nothing's been done? The Bunshin asked. There's no trace found, from what I understand, Tucci replied. And it rarely is the same thing twice. Next, a caravan will be attacked, a supplier will stop selling or a shipment will go missing. No real link between the two events, except that they affect the same people. There's a good number of traders who stopped selling because of that. It just cut too much into their profits to be viable. One thing's sure, I'm not giving up, Janae exclaimed. I'm not gonna let something like this get between my clients and me. He looked straight at the restaurant owner. You'll have your orders on time, even if I have to run back and forth to win by myself. Glad to hear it and to see you're fine, Tucci replied with a smile. I'll be leaving you to your work and returning to my stand. See you later, Janae-san. See you? I'll make sure to pass by sometime today, the clone replied with a wave. He stayed there for 3 more hours. Inbu came and went, and he was interrogated by a pair of chunin, as were the other merchants who had cargo inside the warehouse. One thing was sure, something like this wouldn't happen again. The Naruto Council wouldn't let it. Prank Day 95. No, no, no! Iruka yelled. They have to be put in the same movement, not separately. Try again. Hi! The many Narutos replied, grabbing their fake explosive tags back from around them. This was both a reward for the trap course and an early birthday present from Iruka to Naruto. The Chunin had taken the day off from teaching, and instead was giving Naruto a full day of personal training. And the academy student accepted that happily. Faster! Make those seals faster! Your enemies won't wait for you to finish, you know, the teacher yelled. Iruka was a slave driver when working with a single person. Naruto, however, didn't mind. He knew very well that he learned best while under pressure, as the Kage Bunshin had proven months ago. The training group broke for dinner late, at nearly 2 p.m. They were making good progress though in the advanced tagging techniques Iruka was showing. So, we doing good enough? Naruto asked while snacking on a rice ball. More than good, the teacher exclaimed. I don't really have a reference for learning with shadow clones, but you're making progress faster than I did when my Jonin sensei taught me. Naruto smiled, then grimaced somewhat when something came to mind. Can I ask a personal question, sensei? Iruka inclined his head somewhat. Go ahead. I may not answer though. He then grabbed some dango from his plate. Did you ever try for Jonin? Naruto asked. The Chunin shook his head. No. I was a genin for many years, and barely made it to Chunin. Going farther than that seems impossible. Did you want to? Naruto continued. Well, who doesn't want to be powerful and respected, to be one of the elite? I wouldn't mind, provided I deserved it, Iruka answered, eyes looking up. I'd like being a Jonin sensei, I think. Naruto smiled. Want help? What? The Chunin replied. Well, I'm already teaching one ninja. Teaching another shouldn't be that much of an issue, Naruto explained, grabbing a dumpling. You're... Iruka started, then stopped himself. I don't remember that from the last council meeting. Who are you teaching again? Hinata. Hinata Hyuga? Iruka asked. Naruto nodded. Isn't she currently in training for the tournament? Naruto nodded again. Yeah, and I'm the one training her. Her father did a dick move, and she didn't like her chances. Yeah, I understand the last part, Iruka said, frowning. Niji, her opponent, is pretty much the best gentle fist user of his generation, and his Jonin teacher is well known for his immense skill in taijutsu. She'll have a rough time there. We're working on it, Naruto replied, face serious. She's advancing pretty well. I think she'll have a good chance against her opponent at the tournament. What are you teaching her? Iruka asked. Naruto smirked. That you'll see at the arena like everyone else. There was a moment of silence as Iruka thought as he ate. He had to agree that he'd not improved much since he'd taken up a post at the academy. The long days along with his work at the mission office might be safe, but it didn't leave much time for training. What time he could give might keep him from getting rusty, but it didn't push his skills up. Well, there wasn't much to lose by accepting Naruto's help. His student was full of surprises, so who knew what he might learn? I wouldn't mind some help, actually, the Chunin finally replied. I might not make it to Jonin, but I wouldn't say no to learning more. Good! Naruto exclaimed. We'll start after the next council meeting. Prepare yourself to learn. The Kage Bunshin, he intoned gravely. The Kage. Are you sure? Iruka asked. From what I understand, it's a Jonin level jutsu. It only makes sense to go for Jonin techniques when you're reaching for that rank. Anyway, Hinata managed it, and she's up to 2 at the same time by now, Naruto explained. I'm pretty sure you can manage at least 1. Iruka had to agree that this was one technique he wouldn't mind mastering. The ability to leave a clone behind to grade homework while he trained would be invaluable. I'll hold you on to that, the Chunin said, rising. Now, are you ready to continue? You betcha. Naruto answered, jumping straight up. Let's go, let's go. Iruka smiled at his students' enthusiasm as they went back down to the training area. If he kept that up, he'd go far for sure. Prank Day 98. Today was a day Naruto both liked and dreaded. This was one of the very few times during the year where he'd be able to hang out with the Sandaime without him being busy with work. On the other hand, this was the day where the general Konoha population treated him the worst, as long as the Hokage wasn't there. And this year, he knew why. Today was the day of the Kyuubi's defeat, the day the Yondaime was honored for his sacrifice. Today was October 10th. His birthday. School was out today, as it was every year. Normally, on days like this one where he didn't have school, he'd leave straight for the Uruhara basement to go and train, but today he stayed at home and waited. He did train a little in his apartment, but he mainly took the morning slow. Even he could take his birthday off. The Hokage knocked on his door at exactly 11, and Naruto waited no time to answer. Hey old man, he said with a smile. Finally had a day off? You should take some more, else you won't last until I can take your place. The elder ninja smiled back. Don't worry, these old bones have plenty of life left in them. Now ramen? Ramen! Naruto exclaimed, stepping close to the Sandaime. The elder ninja put an arm around his shoulder, and both vanished in a burst of chakra, leaving only some leaves behind. At that exact time, the two of them appeared right before the restaurant. Normally, Ichiraku Ramen didn't have that many customers, especially today. Most people knew that he frequented the establishment, and made themselves scarce on this day. But this time, there were already 2 people present. A woman in her 20s with her dark hair in a bun, and a rail-thin teenager with dark brown hair. Naruto had a good idea who they were. Right as the Hokage had his back to him, Naruto clapped both thumbs together, rabbit sign language for report. Both the people at the stand scratched behind their left ear, nearly in perfect synchronization, code for listening. Yup, both of them were clones. Naruto took a seat right beside the Hokage, and started ordering. He hadn't had breakfast, just to make sure he could eat as much Ichiraku ramen as he could. As usual, conversation quickly started flowing from the Sandaime, who started going on in his stories as he normally did, not that Naruto minded. The two clones left not long after, with about a minute's interval. Hiruzen was explaining one of his mission as genin, in which he had been interrupted by an ANBU, when something came to Naruto's mind. Hey, old man. Mind if I ask you something? Go ahead, the Hokage said with a smile. The ANBU, they're the ones who go after criminals, right? Naruto continued. Right. If someone needed one, like, urgently, Naruto said. How does someone call them? Well, they're supposed to be watching the whole town, so they shouldn't be very far. Yelling might work well enough, the Hokage explained. I suppose you have a good reason to ask? You saw something that required the ANBU instantly? Kinda, yeah, the blonde replied, scratching the back of his head. Nothing I can prove, though, and whoever did it escaped without being seen. The Naruto Council had sent people around as they were filling the tunnels. They hadn't caught a single glimpse of anyone dangerous or suspicious anywhere close the burning building. The Hokage nodded seriously, then made a single sign in the air. An ANBU member appeared a second later, staying only long enough to hand the Hokage something. He handed the item to Naruto. This is a specific kind of flashbang, reserved to the ANBU. It explodes bright blue, and is the ANBU's signal for an emergency, the Hokage said solemnly. I'm going to trust you with this. Let's be clear, though. It isn't for pranks. If you use it, I expect you to have a valid reason, because the punishment for using it improperly will be grave. Do you understand? Naruto nodded seriously. I understand, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen smiled, and the seriousness of the moment was broken. Good. Now, where was I? Don't tell me you already forgot, old man? Naruto smirked. You'd nearly thrown a fireball in the ANBU's face. You're getting way too old if your memory's going. Ah yes, the Hokage replied. Well, I threw that fireball. Then I turned blank as a sheet, realizing what I had just done. I was sure my sensei was going to put a tree where the sun don't shine for. Prank Day 101, the training had changed. Since Hinata was now able to call on a single shadow clone every now and then, the real Hinata and the clones had switched roles. The clones now trained with the chakrams, fighting Naruto clones with live steel, while the true Hyuga focused on her physical abilities. Push-ups, sit-ups, running, weights, she did them all. The goal was to improve her endurance as much as possible before the tournament began. The clones had done some research on Niji's sensei, and saw the kind of training he did. They wanted to make sure Niji couldn't easily outlast Hinata. 300. The genin said, her face drowning in sweat. A Naruto clone handed her a towel, which she accepted with a bright smile. She was breathing hard, but seemed ready to continue. Now what, sensei? She asked after taking a deep breath. Well, your clone is still down there fighting and you've learned all the techniques required by the Matsuri style, so we're going with something else, another Naruto in the room said. She managed the techniques very quickly, faster than Naruto would have alone. It helped that they weren't particularly demanding in terms of energy. Hinata nodded. What, sensei? It's a blinding technique I've learned, that Naruto explained. One that's very effective against people with dojutsu. A little too effective, from my point of view. How is that? Hinata asked. It can cause permanent eye damage if used too close. Needless to say, you are not to use it while you have your Byakugan active, understood? The other boy said, completely serious. Understood, sensei. Naruto scratched the back of his head. I'd prefer if you didn't use it against Niji. He's an asshole from what I've heard, but he doesn't deserve being blind for the rest of his life. Hinata nodded in agreement. There was a lot of bad blood between Niji and her, but something like that wouldn't solve anything. It would just breed more resentment between the main and branch houses. Then why teach me? Better you knowing it and never needing it than the opposite, Naruto replied. I can trust you with it. Use it only against deadly threats. Hinata nodded again. Hi, sensei. Now, it goes like this, the blonde said, showing her the hand signs. It's important to focus on light as you do it on. Hinata listened intently. She'd gotten so much better because of Naruto, and she didn't want to disappoint him. She was going to give it her everything, and show him how good she was. Prank Day 103. The trading network hadn't even faltered after the fire. In fact, they started pushing even harder, being even more visible. They were prepared now for whoever was after them. The group had rented space in another warehouse, this one on the other side of the village, and was doing business from there. From what Tucci and the others were saying, they should expect another attempt anywhere from tomorrow to sometime the next month. Probably not a fire, though. They were ready for that case anyway. Day and night, there were now a dozen clones under various disguises in and around the warehouse. It wasn't the most glamorous of jobs, but they managed. Most of them trained in something or other while waiting, techniques or the like in animal form. Nezumi, named after his disguise, that of a large rat, received a memory from the clone leading the current round of the guard. This was the request for a status update, which happened every hour. The rat clone stopped walking on the wall, dropped down, and crossed his paws to send his update, thanking the training the clones had been doing on this particular version of the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. It was so useful that they'd each worked a good number of hours on being able to do it in whatever shape they were. He had a flash of 4 other locations, the Quatuor that accompanied him and the leader as part of the outside guard, then, nothing. Where were the other 6 sets of memories? Zuku, the leading copy, sent another request, this one clearly imbued with a sense of emergency. Again, no answer from anyone inside. Then Nezumi received the all-in command. He didn't wait a second, running straight to the warehouse, then right up the wall. That particular location had been chosen because it had a hole in one of the air ducts, allowing transformed clones to rush straight inside. Nezumi did so, preceded by Zuku and Maru. The first detail that was noticed was the smell. There was something in the air, though fading. The clone ignored that, dashing to their corner of the building. It was completely empty. And not only their spot, but everywhere. Zuku looked all around and, finding no one, turned back into his original form. The rest of the group quickly followed. Kinizumi, the leader, said, "Run to base and make sure our cloners are still fine." Cloners were copies made to duplicate material, in this case their cargo. I doubt we'd all have missed those memories, but better make sure. The rest of you, check for the others. We didn't get an update, so they should still be here. Kinizumi turned back into a squirrel and took off, while the others searched. It didn't take long for them to be found, as they were still at their posts. They were all, to the man, asleep right where they should have been. Shaking them up gave no quick results, and they were loath to use harsher methods that might burst them. It took a clone getting water from a rain barrel and splashing it to their faces before one came back to reality. This one, Chado, shook himself dry, then turned back into Naruto. "What happened?" he asked. "That's what we're wanting to know," the leading Bunshin replied. Chado thought for an instant. "I just fell asleep for some reason." "Did?" "Yes, everyone inside had a snooze," Zuku said, pointing toward the others still asleep. "And we're still missing one." The inside guard looked at those still present. "Usagi's missing," he finally replied. He decided to hide inside one of the boxes, actually. Everyone stared at him. "You means the boxes that are no longer there, right?" Maru said. He took a good look at his surroundings. "Yeah, those." Zuko rose. "Get more water, we're waking everybody up," he ordered. "Then we're all moving back to base. There's nothing else to guard here, and we'll have to wait for Usagi's report before anything else." He clapped his hands. "Let's move, people!" Usagi woke up to masks. Due to his current size, they were huge. Remembering what he currently was, he turned and hid in the corner opposite to the faces, and squeaked as if he was afraid. "There is a rabbit in this box," the first said flatly. "Orders are orders. The contents stay here for 5 nights, then are to be transferred to location 13, the other replied just as tonelessly. He then closed the lid once more. Usagi waited until the noise coming from the 2 ninja moved away, thinking all the while. He'd fallen asleep for some reason, then woke up in this place, wherever this was. Well, first things first. He crossed his paws, sending out an update. He didn't have to wait long for a reply from Zuku, which contained a message for him. "Where are you?" He actually had no clue, so finding out was the priority. The box he was in had a hole in it, one not big enough for a rabbit. Transforming himself into a small rat, he snuck out the container, then navigated around the other boxes to get a good vantage point. The place made him think of the Uruhara basement, actually. Big, empty place, earthen walls, seal lights. There were enough differences to make it clear it wasn't the same, mainly in the shape and the light level, but the basics remained. Exploration was needed then. As a rat, Usagi climbed up the walls, quickly finding himself on the ceiling. He then started down the only corridor leading away from the Naruto group's fake cargo. He took it slow, keeping to the ceiling and matching his color to that of the walls. With his size, everything took longer, but he emerged in the equivalent of a cafeteria after an hour's search. And there were quite a few people inside. At first, Naruto thought this place belonged to the ANBU, but reconsidered after a while. There were too many kids down there, some he'd even guessed were younger than the real Naruto. Also, he'd seen a lot of ANBU masks in his life, and none of the ones down here matched. They were similar, true, but not exactly the same. The eerie thing about this place was how calm it was. Even with more than 15 people in the room, there wasn't any conversation save short phrases delivered flatly here and there. It was even more silent than his time in the real ANBU cafeteria, something which he wouldn't have though possible. Still, cafeteria meant kitchen, and kitchen meant some form of ventilation shafts. He'd used those in pranks before, so he knew what to expect. It took a while for a valid entry point to be found, but once that was done there was no stopping him. Once far enough away from the cafeteria, he generated a dozen clones, and sent every possible way in the ducts. The first one out was one of the new clones, and he messaged everyone as soon as he was back above ground. He was then quickly guided to an alley where the rest of the guard team were waiting. "So, what now?" the new Bunshin asked, turning back to human form. "You fine?" The clone nodded. "Well," Zuka replied. "Orders are to make sure whoever causes these issues to be forced to stop. With what you found, I say dropping the ANBU on them is the best way to accomplish that. Either they're linked to the ANBU, and nothing bad's going to happen to them, or they're not and this'll get them out of our way. Now lead on, we're going back in. We need to find an entry point the ANBU can use." Going back inside, the many clones followed the new Usagi back to the cafeteria, then spread up to cover more ground, trying to find the main exits. They hadn't even found one when Izumi messaged them all. Following his directions, the group ended up in a sealed room with a pit in the middle. There was a rancid odor all over the place. "What's that smell?" Zuka messaged using his paws. Nezumi simply pointed down at the pit. The group went down to see what was hidden in the darkness. After a moment to let their eyes adjust, they cringed as they realized what was inside this hole. Corpses. Especially kids' corpses. Some of them still had broken masks on, testament to what they'd been before their deaths. "Not ANBU," Zuka messaged, and everyone nodded at that. "To work," he then indicated, and everyone ran back up, full of rage and anger. The next message was unfortunately accompanied with something the clones did not want. An alarm. "Damn it!" Usagi said inside. Below him, the false ANBU started running around like someone had kicked over their anthill. He received a burst of memories coming from a clone using their copy of the ANBU's blue flashbang, then another as a second clone did the same. Seeing explosive tags being placed on the walls, he quickly sent a message out with that as the last memory. The message was clear: escape now. In the end, only 6 of the clones made it out. The entrances they'd found were now crawling with ANBU, who would unfortunately have some difficulty finding anything. Demolition charges had blown those entrances up, and a few of the clones had seen members of the false ANBU escape through secret exits hidden in the walls as the place exploded. The group went to an alley and transformed back once it was sure the place was clear. "What now?" Nezumi asked. "Well, whoever they were, abandoning a base like that one has to have put a wrench in their plans," the leader said. "The network should be safe for a while." "You really think this is over?" Maru asked. Zuka shook his head. "No. We're not that lucky. That's just round 1, he said. But we'll at least have a period of calm after this. Those saboteurs and thieves will have other things in mind in the coming days. We'll have to keep our guard up, sure, but the network should be able to rest a little." The rest of the troop nodded. They'd won the first battle, now they simply needed to keep that advantage. Prank Day 104. Between his normal work and the Chunin exams, it had taken nearly 3 weeks before the Hokage could get to Iruka and Katori's request for a trap specialist. It took another week before the selected Jonin was back in Konoha. As such, a week before the end of the Chunin examinations, Sarutobi Hiruzen, Tekuno Kenden, and 2 accompanying ANBU members were found standing before the former Kaihotiki compound. "So, you requested an evaluation of this place?" the Hokage asked. Kurotori nodded. "Indeed. Yumino-san," he then nodded to his compatriot, "demanded the help of an unrated trap specialist for this year's stealth and trap avoidance exam. Both he and I went through the course after the students, and neither have managed to get through unscathed. The both of us were curious as to what rank should be given to our specialist." "Explains my presence, at least," Tekuno said, cracking his fingers. "Want me to run the gauntlet, I suppose?" "Correct," Kurotori answered. "Please remember, though, that this place was built to test people. As such, the difficulty rises with how far one goes. There's also nothing lethal in the building. So forget power to focus on placement, variety, and the like." He nodded. "I get it. Then I'll let you go," Iruka said, tossing the Jonin a scroll. The goal of the exercise was to grab a scroll like this one. "Good luck." "One doesn't need luck when one has skill," Tekuno replied with a smirk. "Hopefully it'll be at least something of a challenge," he said as he entered the building. Everyone watched him go. "Given that the both of you are teachers at the academy, and that this place's creator is unranked, I suppose the author is the person I am thinking of, correct?" the Hokage said, looking straight at Iruka. "You have the right person in mind, Hokage-sama," the Chunin answered. At this, the Hokage smiled. "Then, for once, I will see the results on someone else that actually asked for it. I've seen enough of his skill to appreciate when someone else comes to bat." Both Chunin and even one of the ANBU nodded at that, keeping the house in sight. There was no noise coming from it, but that might not mean anything. It took 10 minutes before the man came back out. "Well, that is one sneaky bastard," the man said, whistling. "I seem to see some orange on the side of your shirt that wasn't there before," the Hokage pointed out, his lips curling up. "I seem to remember you having sandals on your feet when you went in," Iruka added with a smirk. Beside him, Kurotori was unnaturally rigid, something that clued people to the fact that the man was hiding his emotions. "Ha ha ha," the Jonin said blankly. "Go ahead, laugh. I just want to get whoever built this here. I have some questions how he managed some of those traps." "First, the rank you'd give if you would?" Sarutobi said, now serious. "Difficult to say, actually," he turned to the 2 Chunin. "I'm correct when I say there's no chakra used in those traps, right?" "Outside the false explosive traps, yes," Iruka answered. "Those were nice. Not well drawn, but nice," Tekuno said with a nod. He'd worked enough with explosive tags that he could spot a fake a mile away. "Thing is, I can't rank him because there are no chakra traps. If chakraless trapping existed as a speciality, the man would be Jonin level at least, but he's missing half of the required material for a trap mastery. If whoever it is picks that up, he'll be Jonin level there right quick." He thought for a moment. "Probably better than that, even. His trap placement is mean, effective, and plays on psychology efficiently. That last pit trap of his would have gotten most of those who managed it through. I only dodged it because of what I could read in his trapping methods." He looked around. "Now can I meet this enigmatic trap master?" Iruka went to the door. "Naruto, come out." "Minute," came the boy's voice, and 60 seconds later he came out. "Traps are reset, if someone else wants to try his luck." "You're," Tekuno said, then he folded in half, laughing. "I'd heard rumors the ANBU were having problems hunting you, and now I can believe it," he said between guffaws. "They must have hated your guts for some of those." "Speaking of ANBU," Hiruzen started, turning toward his 2 guards. The both of them went rigid. "It is a valid test for ANBU, don't you think?" The speed at which they shook their heads clearly indicated that they didn't think so. "That was an order, in case I was misunderstood," the Hokage said, now quite serious. The 2 ANBU's hands flashed out in some form of communication, going too fast to be followed. After 10 seconds, the head of the one on the left fell slightly, and he walked toward the building. When he came back, he was also sandalless, and his suit was orange at crotch level. No words were said, but the looks of those watching said it all. Naruto didn't even notice, having an emphatic discussion on trap triggers with Tekuno. Prank Day 107. "There's 3 days left before the day of the tournament," Naruto said, looking straight at Hinata opposite him. So here's the plan for the time that's left. The last day's free, to make sure you'll be as rested as possible for the main event. The day before that, we'll go over equipment, planning and the like. Nothing strenuous. The blonde boy smiled. Today's sparring. All out. Against me. How is that different from the previous days? Hinata asked. The last week had been full contact sparring, ever since she'd gotten proficient enough with the various jutsu that were part of the Matsuri. You're facing the real thing this time, Naruto explained, smirking. It took a moment for Hinata to realize what that meant. Naruto? She stuttered, lowering her face to hide the blush coming up. She'd gotten used over time to the clones, and had managed to stop blushing instantly their presence. Clearly, the real Naruto still had an effect. Yes, the boy said with a smile. It isn't the first time I come over. I was the one who helped you with the Mabushii Kagayaki, and I also looked on a few of your spars with the other clones. Hinata just blushed redder. Now I'll be doing something special for the first few matches, just to get you ready for the real thing, Naruto explained. There will be a special rule for those matches. I touch you, you lose. Hinata looked back up a little. Why that? As an answer, Naruto did the ram's seal, turning into someone completely different. Fate may have brought you here, Hinata-sama, but it will lead you no further, Naruto as Niji said, in a very credible imitation of the Branch House member's speech. He then took a pose similar to the first stance of the gentle fist. Come face the defeat that is your inevitable destiny, he continued, winking at her. She gulped. She understood now the reason for the rule. He wanted to prepare her as best as he could for what she would face in the arena. She couldn't give up now, especially not with Naruto looking at her. I'm ready, she said, taking the wide-armed stance she'd found best for the Matsuri. This battle's results are preordained, Naruto answered, dashing forward, upon which time battle was joined. The first spar went fast, as did the second. The third lasted 5 times as long. By the fifth, Hinata was fighting as she'd done in the previous day's spar. By the 7th, she was even bantering back somewhat. Naruto smiled and sighed as the 9th battle started. Hinata would do just fine in the arena, he could tell. Prank Day 108. Iruka was taking a breather, having tried once again to generate a single Kagebunshin. He had new appreciation of his student's stamina. A couple of attempts had him down for the count. This was only the second day's training he managed to get with Naruto, and he hadn't yet made much progress on the technique. He did, however, manage a good spar against both a katana-wielding Naruto and an unarmed Muramaru, which was more of a challenge than he'd expected. And he was a chunin, while Naruto wasn't even an official ninja yet. So, how are the ninjutsu studies going? The teacher asked as he rested, recovering his chakra. Any issues? We're getting better, Naruto answered, not deviating from his sword kata. Beside him, Muramaru was doing his own kata, while Ariko was throwing shurikens at a target. She was already the best in her class with kunai, and she wanted all the thrown weapons nailed. Well, the clones are, mainly. Do tell, the chunin asked. The clones are down to 9 usable clones when using the technique, while I have to go with 15 if I want to use the normal ones instead of the Kagebunshin, Naruto replied. Explain. Naruto scratched the back of his head. You remember my clones from the last exam? Iruka nodded. Well, look. The blonde did the hand seals for the technique multiple times, and the clones appeared in waves. First had 2 who instantly crouched down sick, and every wave after that was double the quantity and looked better than the previous. By the 4th, the clones were normal and didn't even react in any way. So, basically, Iruka asked for confirmation. You're working your way down instead of up. Naruto nodded energetically. How about the other techniques? The teacher asked. Kawarimi is something we use so much by now, it's nearly instinctual for clones, the student answered. I still have some issues with it, but only for really short distances, like a meter or less. And the current record in kilometers is around 8 by now. That's... Iruka started then stopped. That's preposterous, that what it was. Show me. Naruto took a deep breath, then switched on his other side, about 2 meters away. Why are you switching with air? Outside switching with someone whose chakra opposed yours, it was the most difficult and intensive usage of the technique. I find it easier actually, especially when switching close, Naruto explained. You're clearly still using way too much chakra then, the teacher noted. Yeah, Naruto replied, waving him off. I'm working on it. Now you gonna try again or you're gonna stay down on the floor until you fall asleep? He smirked. I'm not giving up, Iruka replied, recognizing the words for the encouragement they were. Just as a last question, you busy the day of the tournament? Depends on your definition of busy, but why? Naruto answered. As academy teacher, I have a seat reserved and can bring someone else with me, Iruka explained. Mind hanging around your teacher on a day off? Naruto smiled. Of course not. I'd be happy to go with you. He then thought for a moment. Well, technically I'll already be there, but I wouldn't mind going as Naruto. Katori is bringing Miramara, I suppose? The teacher put out. And the Konoha fashion ninja have 7 seats in their name, which includes Ariko, Naruto added. At least, with luck, that'll mean I'll have 3 different viewpoints of Hinata beating her cousin. How's she doing then? Iruka said. Anything I should look out for? Naruto looked at his teacher straight in the eyes. Wait, and you'll see at the tournament. Now enough chattering, or I'll send you in the corner with a dunce hat. Back to work, student. Hi, Uzumaki-sensei. Iruka answered with a smirk, making the cross seal with his hands. Kaige Bunshin no Jutsu.